Okay, testing, testing. Sorry, running a little bit late. Let me here go to restream real quick. So, got a new setup. Camera's in a little bit of a different angle. Finally got my monitors up, which is good. Oh, hush, Twitch. Okay, good. Everything seems to be fine. And hey, good morning. Thanks for showing up. The good news is I can make this chat really long now since I have two 34-inch monitors stacked on top of each other. I'll have my workstation set up soon. As far as the video goes, I have an old workstation video set up, so I'm going to make a new one. Apologize in advance for my shirt. I've got a UNSC shirt, and for some reason the white key's out with the blue screen. I don't know. I'm not going to change shirts real quick. I don't think. Worth it. Okay. All right. Thanks for showing up, everybody. Like I mentioned on my Facebook page, I think, or maybe it was on Twitter, we're going to have a cube brush giveaway. I'm going to let my wife do that before she goes to work. So she's just going to scroll through the comments and pick a name. And then if you can give me your email address, I'll send that to Cube Brush. And that'll be that. As far as I know, it's a $50 gift card. So, and you don't have to, obviously, you don't have to spend it on my Cube Brush, spend it on anybody's Cube Brush. And there's a lot of stuff on Cube Brush you can get for pretty cheap. So kit bash libraries and tutorials and all sorts of cool stuff. So that should be fun. Okay, let's get kind of started here. So what we're going to be doing this live stream is going over the so issue 32 of NCG magazine. I've got an article in here. Of course, this is in Chinese, but we're going to do a video supplement to this. It's basically going to be the making of that sci-fi weapon. So if we go, there's another way we can look at that here. Actually, yes, let's go to ZBrush Central. There's another resource. You can kind of see a little bit of the making of if you go to this here. Let me grab that real quick. ZBrush 4R8. Beta Testers Gallery. So there's ZBrush Central. ZBrush 4R8 Beta Testers Gallery here. Let's go to page 4. These images load in real quick. Scroll way down. You're going to see this is what we're going to be working on. So this is the concept image that we started with. If you want to see more info on this concept image, you can go to my YouTube channel. And if you go to playlists here, if you go to my live stream highlights, you're going to see in here, you should go way down here. There's a couple on just kind of, I think it's using Brainstormer and Photoshop to concept out not that image in particular, but images like that, as well as if you go to my, hold on, see if I can find this here. There it is, my ZBrush workshop. Also, if you missed it, I forgot to mention that. So here's the ZBrush workshop. If you scroll down here, we go a little bit into like just drawing and concepting in here. I forget what episode it is, but I'll see if I can find that later and post it. Also, here's the latest ZBrush 4 where we did the, or ZBrush 4R8 where we did the mug of beer with bubbles in it. That kind of is a companion piece for what I did on my YouTube channel. I made this playlist yesterday. This ZBrush to Keyshot Bridge quick start. You know, you can go through here and you can see how we made the Ryzen logo using the SVG Text 3D over here in the plugins. And then we modeled some, it's really quick, easy modeling tasks, and then sent that over to Keyshot. We talked about Keyshot Pro and Keyshot HD and which version might be better for you and how to kind of just do quick renders. And it's basically a quick start, you know, my quick starts that I do occasionally. You can go through there and kind of do that. So we're going to be doing the making of this weapon, and I've already got a little bit of stuff kind of in here, but we'll go more in depth. you know what? I'm going to see if I can pull up my original. Give me a second. Where would that be? Google Drive. Because I have the article in English when I wrote it, so I should probably go through that to make sure, because I can go through the pictures and kind of tell, but let's see. There we go. Got it. Okay. You know, I wonder if I could release this too, because here's the English version that I wrote. So I got that text here. And we can get started if y'all are ready. Again, thanks for showing up. And yes, I'm going to be, if anybody has any questions, if it's relevant to what I'm working on, I'll go ahead and answer it. I'm going to keep trying to eyeball the chat as I go. If I miss something, just keep shouting it out and I'll get to it. If it's not really relevant to what I'm working on now, I'll just take a note of it and I'll get to it in later streams. So question from Anthony, I also have a 1950X. Do you need to enable something in ZBrush to see a benefit from that CPU? That's a good question. So I don't know that it's super optimized for the 1950X in particular, but you can go over here to Preferences, Mem, and ZBrush will walk you through, where are we at? There we go. No, not Mem. Performance? Performance. There's a test multi-threading and a multi-threading optimizer. You can do optimizing multiprocess into your system, so if you hit that, let's say initialize and continue. Let's see what this does. Hopefully good stuff. Looks like it's running a little test in the background there. Multi-threading optimization completed. Current multi-threading settings are optimized for this system. Cool. So you can maybe run that, and that might do something for you. So, okay, let me see. What do we got? I don't really have room for this magazine, so you know what? I don't really need room, because I'm just going to use this article down here. So step 1, Spotlight concept import. So let's go ahead and do that here. So let's go to, you know, now that I mention it, I did change my computers. Let me make sure that I have, I should. Give me a second. Pistol. All right. Yeah, we got this. Let me just drag this over here to my favorites here. Okay, so now we're gonna import the concept texture in order to work on it. So when you start up ZBrush, you're gonna have this thing in the way. Just go ahead and hit your comma key, get rid of that. And I'm gonna go ahead and preferences initialize one more time. And when I'm recording video, what I like to do is go over here to document and change this range down to 0 so we can kind of get rid of that gradient. So we don't have, it just streams a little bit better. Oh, and you know what else I want to do? Where's my OBS? I'm going to go ahead and record this so I can start. So I can edit this later and we'll have it make a nice little playlist on YouTube. So start recording. Hold on. Let me go to my settings really quick. I can't want to. Okay. Testing. Okay. Supposedly I'm recording. So, okay. We're in ZBrush. If you accidentally draw anything on your screen, or you go over here and you make something on your screen and you go out of edit mode, accidentally start doing this, just hit Control N, that'll clear your canvas. You don't have to go to document new. Oh crap. Sorry, new computer woes. So I'm gonna have to go to mapping over here. So this is my monitor setup as it is, and I'm gonna have to go to portion and tell it, hey, just map to where my ZBrush is, please. There we go. Much better. So you can clear your canvas. You don't have to go over here to document new in order to get a clearer canvas and really just a new document. If with W size on, it's going to fill up this area of the screen that we're working with. So first thing we're going to do is go over to texture, import, and we've got our pistol folder all saved up in here, and we're going to go to our pistol JPEG. Usually I'd put this in like a reference folder, so we can go ahead and double click this, and then we're going to go to texture, grab that, hit the plus sign. That's going to bring it into Spotlight. So I tend to like Spotlight for modeling. Of course, you don't have to use Spotlight. There's a couple different things you can do. So if we just pull up this JPEG on my desktop here, and then we go back into ZBrush, and I'm going to hit Shift Z to go out of Spotlight. You can go, oh, you know what? I'm not even recording it. Right above the screen here, I guess I can move this down. If you look right here, there's a see-through. You can actually crank that up. So while you're modeling in ZBrush, if we drag out our star and go into edit mode, you're going to see when you're in here, ZBrush is going to come back to you. And then while you're modeling here, you can go ahead and set up your modeling stuff. So you can go over here to be like, okay, initialize Q cube, and now I've got a Q cube here. Also, you're going to see down here, I've got like matcap gray and stuff, so I can touch matcap gray, or I can go to my matcap library over here and choose whatever material that I want. And then, of course, I'm going to want to turn on the floor and make it Z forward. Let's turn on polyframe here and turn on X to go across X symmetry, and now I can start just modeling this thing. Yeah, you can absolutely do that. That's a pretty cool way to do it, but I'm going to go ahead and do see-through down to 0, and we'll move this right back up here. I'm just trying to maximize my ZBrush space here, and I don't really go up there that often, so I figured that was safe, and then it caught me. So anyway, now that you can see what I'm doing here, basically what we did was we turn on polyframe over here. If you hover over anything in ZBrush, you're going to see that the shortcut for that is Shift F, and if you hold down Control, you'll get even more information. So you've got your own little help doc with every interface item in ZBrush, plus hovering over, get the name and the hotkey if applicable. So we turn on polyframe, and usually when we're doing hard edge modeling and throughout this entire demo, just keep perspective off. Makes it easier when you're snapping to the side and snapping to the front and doing a lot of hard surface stuff to make sure that things are extruding straight. It's not such a big deal in 4R8 with the new gizmo, but when you're using transform, so if I hit W and then hit Y to go into transform, and basically it's just toggling this on and off. When you're in perspective mode and you hit the transform lines and then you turn perspective off, see how they kind of skew out. So if I was to want to like pull this in a straight line by holding down Shift, it's going to go, and now it's like, whoa, what the hell happened? So that's one of the downsides of using perspective, having perspective turned on when you're using transpose. Now, if I just tap this now and go to the top, it's perfectly straight. So if I hold down Control and Alt, and then it's kind of like, I don't have any masking on my object, but when I unmask this, it's going to do an unmask and then mask everything else. So that's kind of a new feature in 4R8 that's kind of, it'll speed you up a little bit. Oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and get rid of that Camtasia record. That was just to kind of set that. Cool. So now if I hold down Shift and just go, it'll be perfectly straight. So that's a transpose woe. I don't think, if I hit Y, and that goes on our gizmo, and I hit perspective, and I hit X to go out of X symmetry here. So now with the gizmo, if I want to do the exact same thing, if I hold down Alt and just tap a surface normal, that's going to align my gizmo to the normal of that surface. And now if I snap to the top and turn perspective off, oh, it is still skewed a little bit. Okay, so when you're doing hard surface stuff, just keep that perspective off. Keep it off. Now, if you want to, that's not to say you can't start modeling, and then you can always like turn perspective back on. That's just P, by the way. You can hit the P key. You can turn it back on and kind of judge it in perspective, but keep it off while you're modeling. If you do want to judge it in perspective, you can change your focal length over here in the draw menu. So you can change your angle of view here, so you can really crank it up to make it an extreme fisheye, or way down. If you crank it way down, it's going to resemble more of an orthographic anyway. Whew. Okay, so moving right along. Yeah. Spotlight basics. We got that. So spotlight basics, and then blocking out the shapes here. And there's a couple different ways of blocking the shapes, and we've kind of already started to do it. So let's start fresh again. Let's go ahead and go out of edit mode here, hit Control N. And when I'm starting in ZBrush, if I want to start with a primitive, I'll go over here to the simple brush, and I'll just grab one of these primitives. Or if I know I'm just going to go to a Q cube, which is that initialized state, because otherwise, here, let's do this. So if I go over here and I'm like, oh, I want to start with a cube, and I go over here, hit edit mode, and I hit, now I'm in a poly primitive, and like, you know what, that's too many spans. I'm going to go down here to initialize, and while this is a ZBrush primitive, I can go down here and drop my H divides down. I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. Let's say this. And then I go to the top, and I'm like, well, this isn't really going to help me that much. So what I would tend to do if I want to just use a cube is hit make polymesh 3D and then go down to initialize. And after I've made it a polymesh 3D, I no longer have primitive initialize options. I have these Z modeler primitive options. So I can go to like a cylinder, X, Y, and Z orientation, or a Q cube. And you change your resolution here and hit Q cube. So you can like go 1, 1, 1 if you want to make a really simple cube. You're also going to notice it got smaller. So if I go over here to my star, it's that big, and then I go here to my Q cube, it's pretty small. I also tend to do deformation to unify. That makes it the same size as a ZBrush primitive. That's one way you could do this. Another way you could do it is you could start with any primitive. You can grab a Helix 3D if you want to, make it a Polymesh 3D, hit W, and then you can go into, let's go to brush, insert BI. I'm hitting the B key and then the I key, and then I'm going to go over here to IMM primitives. These are H, these are half primitives, and we might get to that later when we talk about mesh fusion that ZBrush has built in. But for this insert mesh primitive, I'm just going to hit that key, and then I can hit W, and now I can just cycle through these ones here. So you can just pick out whichever primitive that you want. Another thing you can do, there's always so many things you can do in ZBrush. So another thing you can do is you can hit this little gear icon, and you can choose your primitives in here. Now this is probably a pretty cool way to do it. So if I wanted to start with, say, a polysphere, I can just click that, and then you also have X and Y divides over here. And if you want to change that completely, let's go over here to Cylinder 3D. So now this one here, we have an inner radius. We can pop that in and out and go through here for our H divides and our V divides that way. So that's a really quick way to kind of dial in your primitives as kind of a starting point. If you want to add a primitive to this, just hold down Control and tap, and that'll go ahead and mask this. And think about masking as just freezing it in and it's protecting it. You know, you're putting a masking shell around this so you can't affect it anymore. And now when you go back through here, actually hit W one more time, you're going to see our gizmo is in here. And if you hold down Alt, you're going to see that little lock pop up. You can move your gizmo around and you can reorient it. And where you orient and move that gizmo is if you go into this thing and then you add, say, another cylinder, that's going to orient and position that gizmo where that cylinder is. If I undo that and I hold down Alt, I can reset my orientation. And if I hit this key right here, it's going to go to Unmask Mesh Center, which in this case it's masked, but it still went to the center. It's okay. That'll go ahead and put it right back in the middle here. So now, let's say I hold down Alt and I move this gizmo forward, or just reorienting it, or you get Alt tap in the front here. Now we go back in here, then we can choose like a ring 3D, and that'll put this ring in here, wherever that gizmo orientation was, and then you could either scale it. I don't know why I would ever want to use that scale, maybe in a very specific case, but you could scale this if we wanted to, and then you could change the inner radius of the ring. And then of course you got your S divides and your twists, so you can here, and your coverage if you only want half a ring, and length divides here, so you can kind of simplify that, and then there you go. So now you're happy. If you're happy with this, you can just hit W, go back into gizmo mode, and there you go. Now, if you want to continue adding things, just make sure you Control drag to unmask and then Control tap to mask. All of those masking things you can get over here in this little menu here. And if you want more info on this, by the way, we've already covered this, but I figured it's relevant as far as talking about making primitives and video and ways to do that. But just in case, again, go to my YouTube channel here, and if you go over here to ZBrush 4R8 What's New, you will see, let's see if we can find it over here. I like this look better. Yeah, here's a ZBrush 4R8 What's New, and now you can go through here, and there's like 68 videos on what's new in ZBrush 4R8, and all of this is found in there, just the initialized primitives. Another resource you can use, let's see, and there we go. So like I mentioned this morning, we're going to have a QBrush giveaway. And speaking of QBrush, if you go to my QBrush page, you can get the ZBrush 4R8 What's New. It's for $0. Actually, I should probably make that free. So when it's free, you can just get it for free. If when it's $0, you can type in however much money you want to give me and then get it. I'm not suggesting you do that. That's a mistake on my part. But you can get the ZBrush 4R8, download them, and then you can just have them available to you on your computer or whatever you want. You can also do that on my Gumroad page. Here's the ZBrush 4R8 What's New, and then also the new Keyshot to ZBrush bridge that I made yesterday. So 3 different ways for you guys to download and watch however you'd like. Okay, let me see. Can you show how to do panel loops, please? How do you get clean cuts? Yes, we will probably, do I do a lot of panel loops? I don't don't do a lot of panel loops in here, but let me go ahead and make a note here. I do use those a bunch though. If you go over here to my YouTube channel, and again you go to live stream highlights, and you scroll all the way down, you're going to see a hard surface excerpt episode. And if we go over here, there we go. We go over a ton of different panel loop options and slicing and dicing and remeshing and all sorts of cool stuff you can do with your hard surface stuff. So we're going to be covering a lot of hard surface stuff today, obviously, because we're going to be making a weapon. But that's another resource to you. So if I, just in case I don't get the panel loop specifically, that's a resource for you. You know what? It's stupid. Let me link that to you guys. I have that ability. Oh, there it is. Weapon concepting. So video 99, Pavwork 04. We go over the brainstormer weapon concepting part. Hard surface excerpt. I will link you right to it. There you go. And while we're here, let's do this too. My playlist page. And for this one, let's go to... This is my Pixelogic here. And we'll do CubeBrush. If you want those videos to download, go to CubeBrush. There we go. Okay, so what else we got? Okay, we had another... And again, if I miss anything, I'm doing a really quick pass through here, so I apologize in advance. Just keep shouting it out, and I'll get to it. You guys hear me okay? Insert mesh question. How do I insert my meshes at the original size and not based on my brush size? There is no, that's from Karsten. There is no real, this is going to sound weird, there's no size in ZBrush. Basically your size is controlled. There's no native, I guess there's no native size in ZBrush. Like how you capture your brush, if I was to capture a brush like this, then I go to brush, create insert mesh, new. It creates an insert mesh. So it's really based on my bounding box. So if I go in here and I scale this thing way up and I go to brush, create insert mesh, append. Okay. So now I've got both of these and I grab this one. I'm like, okay, this one's going to come in at a certain size. And then this one's going to come in even bigger. Well, they don't, because they're just, it's capturing the bounding box of your object and then making it one size. So it's really just, it's arbitrary. The scale in ZBrush is arbitrary. Now, that's not to say there isn't scaling in ZBrush that happens when you bring meshes in. That's going to be controlled by your geometry size values, and then also the export value here, the scale there. So between those two, you're going to get certain values here, and also when you go in here and you do like a, so here's my custom menu here. So instead of going down here to deformation, unify, I can just go in here and, did I get rid of unify in here? I might have gotten rid of unify. Okay, I could go into unify here. I think at work I have unify, but at home I don't. Anyways, if you want to learn how to do custom menu stuff, again, go to the link I just sent you guys. It's my YouTube channel here. Go to the Intro to ZBrush Part 2. Where is that at? There it is. Go to Intro to ZBrush Part 2. That'll walk you through all the hotkeys and custom interface stuff. And if also, if you want to download my personal interface that I'm using, you can go to CubeBrush and grab the Intro to ZBrush files, and that'll have my Z startup stuff that you'll need to like get this menu, and my hotkeys if you want them. But you don't have to be me. There's nothing special about this. I'm not a genius. That's just pretty basic stuff. So make your own that makes sense to you. I would say. But you know, speaking to your point, and you did mention that if you do hold down Control, it'll snap as you're dragging this out. You hold down Control, it'll snap to your brush size here. And there's a caveat to this. So as you're holding down Control and dragging this out, you're getting very evenly spaced objects or evenly sized objects. However, if you hold down, not hold on Shift anymore, in ZBrush 4.8, if you double tap Dynamic, it'll turn Dynamic off. So now what you can do is you can hold down Control, it'll snap it to your brush size here. But then if you back way away from your object and you hold down Control, it's going to snap to your brush size relative to where your camera is next to your object. So if you come in here, it's it's going to make it small. So just keep in mind that you're going to want to keep dynamic on if you're going to be holding down control. So now what we can do is make our brush size like this, and then if we back our camera way off, that's our brush size still, and if we back our camera way in, or move our camera way in, I should say, it'll still be the same size. Anywho, you get your undo slider here, so you can just back that undo slider all the way back here. Go back to where we started. Craig Kelly asked me, ZBrush works off RAM and graphics, so it does. I can't remember. I'm looking at building a PC. I want to know what area is best to focus on. It's hard for me to say focus on one area. If you're just making a ZBrush machine, I would go CPU intensive. I don't know that it really taxes your graphics card specifically. However, I use a lot of programs and games and making games and doing development work in Unreal. And also GPU renderers. So Keyshot itself is a very CPU intensive render. And that's why I did the Threadripper video on it. But, you know, there's a lot of renderers out there that use your GPU. And there's also a lot of programs out there that use your GPU in addition to your CPU. So your GPU is important as well. But ZBrush specific, I would say probably your money's better spent on a lot of RAM and a lot of CPU. But if you're doing just general development work, you're going to want a nice GPU too. I know that's not the best answer, which is like, just spend all your money. But that's the best I can do. Yes, Instant says, yeah, ZBrush is CPU based, so good CPU, lots of RAM. Cool. And just in case, we can go over that too as well. That might be interesting. So speaking of CPUs, let's do Control-Shift-Escape. We'll go in here. So what we're using today is the AMD Ryzen Thunderbird 1950X 16-core processor, 16-core, 32 threads, and that comes in handy when we're doing the Keyshot stuff, as well as, let me go in here. Let me see, where do we, properties. There we go. So we've also got, what are we using? 128 gig of RAM. It's Kingston 3000. I don't have my cheat sheet here. I don't have this stuff memorized. Okay. Kingston HyperX Predator DDR4 3000 quad channel RAM. It's got a closed loop liquid cooling main gear Epic 240 supercooler on it. Got a 1000 watt EVGA Supernova PSU. That's our power supply. And then we got Samsung 850 EVOs for our C drive and our other drive that we're pulling this from. What else? Anything relevant here? We're using the 1080 Ti NVIDIA GeForce GTX 11 gig version. I think that's it. I think that makes sense. So, for you hardware peeps out there, that's what we're using today. Let's see. How do you remember all these tricks? I can barely remember what I've eaten this morning. As far as just like ZBrush tricks, I've been doing this for how many years now? 12? I've been using ZBrush for like 12 years. Since way back in sophomore year of college is when I started using ZBrush, and that was way back when ZBrush was barely getting into the first forays into 3D and not 2.5D. So I think just after 2.5, whatever version that was, is where I hopped in. And, you know, they haven't charged me since. So we're going to see how long that lasts, because that seems like a really, really ridiculously good deal. Cool. ZBrush dual processor compatible? I'm not sure on that. That's I would ask the ZBrush devs that one. They might be a little bit busy with the ZBrush Summit that's coming up, but maybe they would answer that. Okay, so where'd we end up? Okay, we're doing, okay, we got these primitives. I think we talked enough about how to make primitives. I think you guys get that. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to take whatever I have, and I really like to start with our initialize Q cube and then going to my deformation unify. And I also like doing the Q cube with a subdivision of 2, so I have a midline here. So when I go to my floor, I turn my floor on, and then I can orient myself in space. So this Z forward is how we want the forward of our gun to look, and then Y up. So it's sitting on our floor, and then this is the front. I also like to turn X on, X symmetry here. So if we go to transform, you're going to see we turn on activate symmetry. We tap X, this is going to toggle that on and off. Of course, you can do symmetry in multiple directions. You can do X and Z, and now you're going to see my cursors on both sides. So if I go through here with my Z modeler brush and I start Z modeling this out, it'll go side to side, front and back, just like a hip hop song there. So we can use that. And speaking of Z modeler, to get the Z modeler brush, I have a hotkey assigned to it. It's B Z. That narrows it down to all your Z key, Z stuff. So Z modeler, Z project, Z remesh guide, and then you see that little letter right there. That's M. So B Z M will grab you the Z modeler brush, or assign it to a hotkey. Just go in here to your brushes, find your Z modeler brush, hold down Control Alt and tap. You're going to see up at the top there it says press any key combination to assign your hotkey, and then you're going to go over here to Preferences, Hotkeys, Store, to store your hotkeys. And any interface items that you change or any custom stuff you do in ZBrush, make sure you go over here to Config, Store Config, and that'll load up ZBrush the same every time you start up. For instance, I have my brush loaded up over here automatically. By default, I think they have like material or something over here. So kill that. You can double click these dividers now in ZBrush 4.8 to open and close them, and then you can go over here to these menus, grab that little white circle, or you can just tap them and it'll shoot it to the nearest side, I think. And then your tool menu is obviously docked over here. In my opinion, is KeyShot better than Cinema 4D and Arnold renderers? Yeah, I would agree with Sinan. It's basically whatever you're trying to accomplish, and I don't think in terms of like better or worse. Everything's just different to me, and I utilize everything. So again, okay, we'll go into Octane, we'll go into Redshift, and we'll go into Arnold, we'll go into V-Ray. V-Ray is another CPU intensive one. That'll be a good one. I think Arnold is too. But KeyShot's like a product renderer, and it's really good for previs. And because I have the ZBrush bridge, it's really easy to just take a model in here and shoot it over to KeyShot, and then just start making really good looking stuff. That's why I tend to use it, and it's also CPU based, so it'll run on almost anything. Same thing with ZBrush. It'll probably run on a toaster as long as it has a CPU and RAM, depending on how heavy you want your models to be. But yeah, CPU-based programs, the good thing about them is they will run on almost anything. So they're very, very compatible. Of course, they're limited by the CPU power, but with a Threadripper, we got plenty of power going on there. So CPU rendering is fine. So we got our object here, and I'm going to go back up here to transform, and we'll turn off Z. So we just have X symmetry turned on, and we got our Z modeler brush. I have that assigned to a hotkey, Alt Q. So now we're Z modeling. Let me make sure we're in good shape here. And we kind of glazed over this here. So we go over here to texture, and we touch the texture, just turn it on, and you're going to see this little plus sign over here. So you have your texture selected, and you hit that plus key. That's going to throw it into Spotlight. Now, a Spotlight open, if you go to texture import again and you bring in another image, it will import those images automatically into Spotlight. So you can kind of load a bunch of images into Spotlight all at once. But we're just going to use this image here. So now that we're in Spotlight, you can go in here and you can scale it down. You can go in here to opacity, and all I really do is the scale and then opacity. I'll drop the opacity down. Oh, another thing you could do, I'm not going to go really heavy into it because I didn't do it in this particular case. Another thing you can do is go over to your floor here, and let's see, where is that at? Draw. So under your draw here, you're going to see you have your grid size and your floor, and you're going to have front, back, up, down, left, right. You can go through here and you can load in your images onto your floor planes. So just like when you're in any 3D program, but Maya specifically, you can go in and like load up an image and it'll snap to your whatever plane you want it to, and you can offset it from there. Same thing in here. You can load those images into your floor plane and then use that for modeling. So again, I didn't do that in this particular case, but that's definitely something you can check out. So we can also go through here, and this is our gizmo mode, our widget mode, while we're using Spotlight. So that means I can tap on my image, and it just changes where the gizmo is anchored on the image. And then, if it's anchored up here in the corner, and then I do scale, it's going to scale from the corner here. And you can also just tap and move, or you can tap and then grab this little center area, and you can move just the widget, or if you go around the center area, it's going to move the entire object here. So we're just going to kind of center this object here. We're going to knock that opacity down, and now we're just off to the races. Now I'm going to go off script a little bit here and talk about ways to generate really quick iterative meshes. So this isn't in the article, but we'll talk about this too. One thing you can do is, let's go, okay, so Z will turn off spotlight mode, and now we can go ahead and model our object here. So if I go ahead and hit Control D and divide this thing up, and then we go in here to like our clay brush, you're going to notice if we start clay brushing through here, we're going to be picking up little pieces of our spotlight, and that's a feature. So that's using the spotlight as an alpha. You can also go up here, go to our standard brush, turn on RGB, and turn off Z-add, turn off polyframe here. You can go through here, and you can paint spotlight onto our object. So if I hit Shift Z, that's going to turn spotlight off. So Z brings spotlight on with gizmo, Z toggles the gizmo off, and then Shift Z turns spotlight off completely. So as we cycle through those, you can see we can paint our image directly onto our object that we're working on, and we can also sculpt through it if we have Z-add on. So we can do Z-add and RGB. If we go over here to where this little LED light is, you can see it's going to paint, and if we turn off our paint, which is under subtool, this little paintbrush icon, you're going to see it's also pulling through as if it was an alpha. You can use that to your advantage, but one thing I want to talk about here is kind of a fun thing you can do. So go to out of edit mode. Let's go ahead and let's go to our simple brush here, and we're just going to grab a plain 3D. We're going to drag it out, go into edit mode, and we're just sizing this thing up. Now there's a way to have settings in here to where it's not going to mess with your spotlight. We'll get to that in a second. But what I'm going to do now, actually, let's go ahead and just change this resolution. So if I go over here and I stretch this out, that'll kind of match this image here. And if I go into polyframe, I'm not making these totally square. So what I could do is go over here to initialize and change my H divides to be more. And now when I stretch it out, those will be more square. Or if I've already initialized, made a polymesh 3D of this plane, what I could do is just go over here to geometry, Z-remesher, and then just do like same adaptive size down to 0, and you can just Z-remesh this plane. It'll give you nice, perfect, even quads. So say, let's make this small. So say your squares aren't that square, and the reason why you want nice, even squares is just to get better resolution and more predictable results while you're painting and stuff. But you can go over here, hit Z-remesher, same adaptive, and that'll just go ahead and give you nice even cubes, nice even squares, or you can even go in here to half and you just drop that resolution down. Might do some weird stuff to your corners here, but in this case, we can just do a quick mirror, and weld. Now, mirror is under deformations, mirror across the x-axis, and then mirror and weld is under geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld. So now you can see in my custom menu why I have mirror and weld right next to each other. So I don't have to go down here and then go find it buried in modify topology. So anyway, let's go ahead and scale this up like so. And then we'll just do a quick Z-remesher, same. There you go, nice even, I keep saying cubes, nice even squares, nice even topology. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go over here, we can hit Control D, and all that's going to do is start subdividing this. If you don't want it to average your vertices down here, if I hit divide, you're going to see it kind of shrinks it all down. Go ahead and turn the smooth modifier off, hit divide, 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 divide. I'm going to divide up to like, say 600,000, and then I'm going to turn the smooth modifier back on just in case. That's just out of habit, but we're subdividing this up, so it doesn't look like it got subdivided, but if I turn polyframe back on, you're going to see we have a lot more polygons here to work with. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can go to my spotlight here, turn on RGB, and now I can just paint, and we're just using RGB here. So now we can just paint through here. Now you're going to see that little string that kind of pops out behind my standard brush. That's the lazy mouse. By default in ZBrush, lazy mouse is on. So we go over here to stroke lazy mouse, you're going to see it's on, but just with one turned on. The good thing is it'll kind of even out your stroke in a very subtle way. The bad thing is you can't do like dot, 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 dot. It's not going to let you because it wants to put that little string behind it. What I tend to do is go into stroke, crank my lazy mouse up, which gives me a nice long string behind it, so I know lazy mouse is on, and then I tap L to turn it off, and now I can just go through here and just start painting. So when I hit L, it's toggling lazy mouse on and off. So now I can go through here, and we'll go ahead and paint, 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 paint. Really quickly, just paint this on. So now if I do Shift Z, you're going to see now we have a plane with that image painted on it. So the problem is, and it was something I forgot to do, this plane isn't Z forward. You can orient this plane in the initialized settings to be Z forward, but since I didn't, I'm just going to hit W and then hold down Shift, and just, you're going to see that white number. I'm going to go here until it says 90. Alternatively, you could also go to your deformation menu, and you could use rotate in here. You can just dial that in, but you want to do it in Y. So you see these little letters here. you can just change that to Y, and now you can rotate it like that. Anyway, so now we're Z forward the way we want to be. I'm going to turn my floor off because we know we're Y up, Z forward. And now I'm going to turn this plane into extrudable geometry that we can use for whatever. Again, I didn't do this on this particular piece, but it's just another option for you guys to go ahead and use. So here's how we're going to do it. So we've got that painted on there. We're going to go to our, let me think, masking menu, and we're going to go to mask by color, and we're going to mask by intensity. So when I do that, you're going to see my gun got darker. However, if I go to my subtool here and I turn off this little paintbrush, that's turning off colorize, you're going to see we have our mask of our object here. So if I start sculpting on this, so we're going to, my standard brush again, do Z add. You can see as I start sculpting, it's got it masked behind there. You could also do a deformation inflate. You can kind of inflate that behind there. So if you unmask, you're going to see that's what we're getting. Incidentally, that's something I use when I do wall panels. I'll do, and I did this on the Pixelogic channel. When I do sci-fi wall panels, this is a technique you can use to kind of paint concept wall panels onto a plane, and then use that to kind of dictate how you want your wall panels to look, and then you can just rebuild off of that. But that's not what we're doing today. So what we're going to do today is I'm trying to find and get the outline of this image. So what we can do is go down here to masking again, and let's go here to mask adjust, and you're going to see we have this mask profile, and let's turn that blur down to 0. So what I can do is I can do this focal shift. We'll do like -75 and hit apply, and ooh, maybe not that much. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Do like -56, kind of dial in. So basically what it's doing is it's picking up this light gray here. So if you didn't have a light blue behind it and you just had a white background, it would do a much better job. Speaking of, let's do that. And hit Shift Z to bring my spotlight back. I hit Z to bring up my gizmo, and you can see, let's go ahead and bring up our opacity temporarily. So if I bring up this opacity, you see that light blue? That's being captured in our mask. So I can go over here to intensity, and I can make that a little bit more intense, and I can kind of start dialing that white out. I think there's also maybe like a contrast I can choose. So you can choose that contrast here. You're also going to see when I crank this contrast up, see how the black parts start turning transparent? Whenever you bring anything into Spotlight, and kind of ZBrush in general with the texture system, anything that's pure black is going to render as transparent in ZBrush. So if you bring in an image and it's got looks like this and you can't paint, it's like, oh, gross. Go in here to either your contrast. Oops. I don't tend to use contrast. What I'll usually do is intensity here. And if you ever mess with this thing and you want to bring it back, I think that's, where is that at? The little backwards arrow. Rotate? No. Oh, you can also hold down Shift, by the way. Where's our restore? There it is. So this little restore here, you can just restore this all the way back to your original state. So let's go ahead and bring this back down. And again, just the intensity, we'll select that. I'll just make this a little bit more intense just to back off those blues a little bit. Or you can go into Photoshop before you bring it in and do it there. So if that's what we want, let's go ahead and bring our opacity back down. And then you could repaint this on your object. However, it didn't do a terrible job, so I'm just going to back my focal shift off a little bit, hit apply, and that'll go ahead and mask this object. Now if I hold down Control Alt and tap, or I go over here to sharpen mask, I can sharpen my mask, or I can blur my mask and then sharpen it. A couple different ways you can do that, and the hotkeys for that, or the shortcuts for that I should say, is if you want to blur your mask, hold down Control and tap on your canvas, and if you want to sharpen it, hold down Control Alt and tap, and then I'll sharpen it up. But of course we're going to want to keep those borders nice. So this is good enough for me. Let me bring up the image of the pistol here, and I'm just going to use this because, you know, I had like a white, if I do Shift Z, I have white painted here and I've got an LED over here. So if I want to make those solid really quickly, all I got to do is hold down Control and with mask pin, let's go ahead and mask this stuff up. So we don't, I can kind of go through really quickly and say, okay, I want this stuff masked. I can also hold down Control and either mask this here, or probably a better idea is just hold down Control and drag out a little box, and then we can just kind of fill this in here. So any areas that didn't quite get filled in, let's go ahead and do a little bit of quick cleanup. And this could probably cause a little bit of trouble in here, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill all that in. These are supposed to be holes, so what I can do is kind of widen them just a little bit, hold down Control Alt. If I want to make these the same size, I can do hold down Control Alt like this, and then I can use the space bar to move this over and just get the same size. Now I did a terrible job, but you get the idea. And we'll go ahead and mask this part out. So now we have a nice outline of this weapon. So what I can do is go into Polyframe here, hit Control W, and that's going to give me a nice poly group for that object here. So if I go out of polyframe mode and turn my colorize back on, and then I do Control Shift, it's going to isolate just that gun off of that plane. So now what I can do is go to geometry here. I'm going to delete lower, because what I'm going to do is hit delete lower, and then geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. And if I have anything in modify topology that I use a lot, it goes right in my custom menu. So here's delete hidden, but we'll go ahead and do it right here. So delete hidden, and now we have our gun projected to a polyplane. Totally cool, but we're going to do one more thing to make this a little bit more usable. So say you wanted to put this into Game Engine really quickly, just to evaluate your concept in Engine, and you could even, you know, do a really quick group node with the pivot and the handle and throw it in. You can go and pick it up in Unreal or whatever and just go walk around with your concept weapon really quickly. But we're going to need thickness, because if I take this into Engine right now, it's going to be, number one, 250,000 polygons, and number two, it's going to be just kind of a mess of just a single plane. So what we're going to do is we can go over here to our subtool menu, and you're going to see we have extract. So we're going to do an extract. I'm going to turn smoothness down to like 1 or 2, because I want to, it's smooth. It's not a big deal. And then the thickness, we can hit extract here. So I'm going to go to the side here, hit extract, and you're going to see it's going to go ahead and give us thickness. If that's not enough, this is just a preview, so if I just move, you're going to see it's going to get rid of that. So we'll just dial this up a little bit. And this isn't really that important. I can always change the thickness on the fly. So if this is the thickness I want, I can hit accept. And now I've got my original polyplane here and my extraction. The original polyplane I don't need, so I'll go ahead and delete that. And now I've got my extraction here. If I turn on my floor plane here, you're going to see it's right down the middle here. So I can do a quick mirror and weld, geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld, and that'll go ahead and give me my gun. And then if I want to make this wider, I can just go through here and just widen this up. So right now, if I turn off my poly paint here, you're going to see this is the geometry I have. And then with my poly paint on, you can just go through here. And like I said, you could use this as your high res, decimate it down, use that as your low res, bake this to a texture, drop it in a game, and then you can run around with your concept. You could also use this as just a starting point if you wanted to kind of evaluate, like, okay, I want these pieces here, so I can replace this with a cube and bevel the edges, or I can turn this into a zero mesh if I duplicate this here. And I go into solo mode here. You could go through here and just start, you know, Control Shift, go in here and trim this thing up, and you could trim out the pieces that you don't want and start just using Dynamesh and all your clipping brushes to make these shapes if you want to. So again, not necessarily something I did in this case, but something that might be useful for us later. So anyway, back on script here. Everybody good? Can you remove the background color of your spotlight image? Yeah, so I tried to do that with the intensity and the contrast. Oh, you know what? There is one more thing. Yeah, let's do that. So I've totally forgot about that. It's been a while. I think they're in here. There is, if we go, let's restore this thing back. I think there's a color key. Oh man, it's been years since I've done this. You can paint, you can smudge, you can nudge. Is there, I thought there was like a color, I'm sure there's something in here. Hue. I could have sworn there was like something where you could sample something and do something to it. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Help docs on the spotlight. Again, it's been a long time since I've been in there. We'll go ahead and knock this down a little bit. Okay, so, and then Shift Z to get rid of that. And then we've got our gun sitting here, which again is useful, but probably not something I'm going to use particularly. Maybe we'll hop back to it. So anyway, we've got this extraction here. If I duplicate this off and I turn off that eyeball, now we just got this, and I turn off solo mode so I can just see this. And now I go down here to initialize, turn that right into a Q cube. They'll just replace that model. And here we are. I'm going to keep, got these damn Central Texas allergies. Always late September, early October, it always gets me. So I'm going to be taking these little lozenges so I don't have to quit like I did in my last stream. Okay, so we've got a Q cube here. I'm going to go to deformation, unify, and then Shift Z. And now I've got our gun here. And this is where I would start my modeling in earnest. So let's see, start with a cube and then just make the base shapes. And this is just Z-Modeler stuff. So if I want to make this shape right here, what I can do is I can just position my cube here. I'm not working on any specific scale. I can always scale everything later. If I have multiple subtools, I can use this transpose all selected and scale everything uniformly. Or I can merge everything together and scale it that way. Or I can use transpose master. A lot of different ways to skin that cat. But I'm not really concerned about that. What I really want to do is just kind of start blocking in the body of this character. I'm going to start with this simple shape here. And I'm not going to model this whole gun because that would be a really boring process. But you can kind of see, you know, what I'm looking for here. Let's go back to our concept. What I'm looking for here is the base shapes. So when I go through here and I start modeling this, I'm kind of breaking down in my head. Move this here. There we go. You know, this basic shape, this handle's a basic shape, and this handle's a little bit more complex because it's like rounded here. You can kind of see it cuts in. So this I would probably just like make a cube, sculpt it. We'll do that in a second. But this easy stuff here, like this basic shape here would be just a cube here, and then this would be Z-modeled in. And then these things here, I wouldn't try to go in there and go like, okay, let me do a mesh fusion and kind of make these perfect things subdivide correctly, like make a sub-D mesh with these things cut in. What I would do is just Boolean those out later. So making this basic shape right here would be what I would do first, then the Booleans I would leave till later. And I would do that for everything that I kind of see in here. So I go back to Z, so I'm not passing back down. And you know what? This is a better shape because this shape's too easy. So we'll go over here, and I want to anchor this on the back. So I'm going to hold down Alt and just move this over. You can also just go back here, hold down Alt, and just tap on the back there, and that'll just position that here. And now I can use a scale to kind of grab that look here. Did it do it? Let me see. Make sure. I want to make sure it's pushing it straight. Oh yeah. Hold down Shift maybe. That's going to constrain it to 0.5s. Interesting. It looks like it's kind of skewing a bit. Got perspective off. I mean, I can always clip it back, but that's a little concerning. Anyway, so we've got our shape here. Hit W if I want to go to my unmatched mesh center. I can just hit that, hold down Alt, and hit this little unmatched mesh center key. So now that we got this shape here, we're just going to basically dial in all these little intricacies here. So I'm going to go through here. I'm going to go to my Z-Modeler brush, BZM, hover over an edge, insert single edge loop, and we'll just pop in an edge here and an edge here. And then I know, well, we'll pop in an edge. If I want to slide this one over, I can just go back to slide edge loop complete. And we'll slide this over. So if I slide this over here, I can hold down Control and Alt and then move this over, and then Control Alt, and I can move this down. And now I can kind of start getting that shape dialed in. Now this shape looks like it's bumped out, so a couple different ways I can do that. I can go over here to insert single edge loop, we'll put one here. And then for these top two spaces here, I can just hold down Alt and paint those. And then I can just go over here to QMesh, single poly, pull this out. Oh, another thing we need to do is go over here to a couple different ways we can do this. So we can go over here to Document, and if I'm positioning my mesh where I kind of want to snap it to, but I want to keep working, what I can do is say, okay, Zaplink properties, custom one, or right or left, or whatever you want to do. So now I can go over here and model this, and then I can just hit custom one, it'll snap it right back. Alternatively, you can go over here to movie, modifiers, sorry, you got to go to movie, and then timeline, and hit show. So now we have a timeline up here. So now when we get this thing positioned where we want to, we can just tap in here, and then I'll go ahead and set a keyframe. So if I want to do like, and if you don't want this, just drag, just take it and drag it off. So if I want to go like, okay, a side view here, I'll set a frame, and then I'll go down further. Oops. I'll change the position, click a frame, change the position, click a frame, change the position, click a frame. So if you've got a spotlight with a whole bunch of reference images on there, you can just hit the right and left key arrows to go between those keys, and you can snap between different views. But since we're just using one, we could use the movie if we wanted to. But I'm going to go ahead and go to movie, timeline, turn off show, and then we'll just use this custom one over here. So again, custom one snaps back. We got this basic shape here. Now this overhangs on the side there, so we can just use clip curve. And clip that right back. And let's go ahead and hold on Control Alt. We'll just move this back as well. There we go. And again, you can see I'm playing it fast and loose. Again, just to get these basic shapes. Now, if I go to the side here, you're going to see this is pretty wide. You're also going to see when I hit go to unmask mesh center, if we unmask here, it goes over here to this side, right? That's not going to help me if I want to, well, I guess it does okay. But if I want to snap this to the middle of my object, what I'm going to do is hit X to toggle off X symmetry, hold down Alt to go to unmask mesh center, and then turn X back on. And now I can just go from the center of the object. Now, how wide do I make this weapon? I don't know. Well, one indication of how wide I want to make this weapon is this barrel right here. If we assume that this is a perfectly round barrel, we already know how wide our gun's going to be because this is a perfectly round cylinder. So if we make the cylinder this big, it's already going to be as wide as we want to make it. So let's go ahead and do that really quick just to kind of get our scene set up a little bit more. And of course I moved that, so now my custom one's going to be off, but we can change that. So anyway, we'll drop this opacity down and we'll go ahead and do a cylinder. So again, if I want to put a cylinder on this thing, I can control tap, hit W, hold down Alt, move this, you know, basically where it's going to be. If we go to custom one, we can actually, let's go ahead and say, oops. I'm going to say custom one was a little bit off because I accidentally moved my thing. So I'm going to go here to custom one. We can go clear to custom one and I'll clear it, or you can do clear all and then you can reset your custom one. Like I was saying, we can go here, reset, go to mesh center, hold down Alt and kind of put the cylinder about where it's going to be. And then we can hit control tap in our document and then we can hit W, go in here, and we'll do a cylinder 3D. Oh, made it big. H divide. Oh, you know what? It also wasn't, hold on. Again, hit X to go out of X symmetry mode, and then go to unmesh mesh center, and then go to X symmetry. There we go, and then we can control tap, and then we can go to our cylinder 3D. That'll just give us one. And then inner radius. Inner radius I'm going to leave alone for now. I want to worry about the overall size of the cylinder here. And then our V divides, we can drop that all the way down. H divides, I'm going to say we want to do, let's say 16. Now the reason I'm choosing 16 is you want to choose like 8, 12, 16, 24, 32 because it'll give you a nice solid line down the middle of both X and Y axis. So that's why I would choose those. Now of course this thing's a little bit big here, so what I'm going to do is if I hit W, you're going to see here's my object way in there, and it's really kind of big here. So what I can do is I can go ahead and go to subtool, split. I have unmasked points, so let's see. These are unmasked. These are masked because whenever you do an insert mesh brush or because we hit control and made this object, this is unmasked points. If I want to split these unmasked points off, I can go to split unmasked points. I can also go to split mask points and split those points off. I'll just hit split unmasked points, and that's going to put this cylinder down below our original body here. So now for this one, what I can do is just go down here to unify, and that'll make it our ZBrush primitive scale, and then I can just kind of move this in. So it didn't quite work how I really wanted it to, but that's okay. So we have our cylinder sitting inside here. If we go into transparency mode, you're going to see here's our cylinder. So if we make our cylinder yay big, and we hold down Alt and pull that gizmo back, and then we make our cylinder this big, and we'll put a bevel in there too. Now we know if I do Shift Z, that's about how wide that cylinder is going to be, assuming the cylinder doesn't look something like that, right? So knowing that information, I can hold down Alt and tap this subtool, and then we can go ahead and scale this in. Now this one looks a lot thinner than our cylinder does in our concept, right? So we'll go over here, opacity again. So here, you know, and this is kind of like the top rail of the gun or down the sights. So of course this is going to be pretty thin in here, and then it might bulk out down here, but we'll figure that out because it kind of plugs into this little cylinder here. So knowing that information, we can probably just scale this pretty far down, like so. And Shift Z, and then we can go back to custom one here, and now we've got this in here. So if I Alt tap this one, we can already start making this thing a little bit closer to what we have here. So I can go to my Z modeler brush, we can hover over this edge, and we can do a bevel edge loop complete. We can go ahead and just like bevel this back here. And if we wanted to do a bevel on the exact same bevel on this side, all you gotta do is tap that one edge and it'll do it perfectly. This bevel's a little bit different here, so I'm just gonna pull back, and that's kind of how it looks. And again, this is where like 2D and 3D get a little bit weird. It bevels all the way back to this line, but it kind of looks like it rounds out here. So I have to make the decision, do I round it out or do I bevel only to this point and make it flatter here? I'm just going to go ahead and round it out. So we'll go in here to Insert Multiple Edge Loops, Interactive Elevation. And we can just kind of pull and round that out just a bit. That'll kind of give us that look. And then we can go ahead and Custom 1 and hit Z and drop our opacity down. There we go. So moving right along, we've got our basic shape here. There we go. Now we can alt tap this one, and now if we want to like cut in here, and this is just basic stuff, right? So if I take this one, we can go to slide, edge loop complete, we can slide this back, and then if we want to get this one here, we're going to go to insert, single edge loop here, and we can move this, and then hold down Control and Alt, and then just move this up. And you can also slide those edges if you want to, and there you go. There's your basic shape, right? Pretty simple. And then if you want to cut this one in, you can go to insert single edge loop, cut this in here, and then it also looks like this kind of cuts in here. So now we can go to Shift Z, we can also go into solo mode here, and now we know that this is kind of recessed, and then it kind of looks like it bulks up down here. So we can take this shape, and we do Q mesh a poly. Although really, let's see, let's snap that back. This shape and this shape, I would probably take this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to insert single edge loop. Now if I insert it down here and I hold down shift, it'll make it perfectly following that bottom shape, but then that's not going to really help me up here. If I start up here and I hold down shift, it's going to snap it to that straight line, and now I can just pull this down, and that'll make my life a little bit easier for doing straight cuts across. So I'm basically just finding this kind of bumped out shape here, and now I can go in here to my Q mesh brush, and we'll just Q mesh a poly. Now the reason I'm able to Q mesh just a single poly is because whenever you alt tag something, you can it just treats it as a single polygon. You could also do Q mesh polygroup all if that makes you feel better. You know, you can do polygroup all here, so you can use that to your advantage. And you can start pulling these shapes out, and then going in here and scaling them down and doing whatever you need to do to kind of dial in those basic shapes. So the Boolean stuff we haven't gotten to yet, but this is just kind of making your basic shapes with Z modeler in specifically. And like I said before, for super easy stuff, what you could do is we can go just like duplicate this off, and it's like, okay, I'm going to use this piece, but of course we're just going to go down here. I should probably make a hotkey for this. Initialize Q cube, and then also a hotkey for unify. And incidentally, if you want to keep these menus open, by default ZBrush is going to want to close things as you click on them. If you hold down shift and open them, it'll go ahead and keep them open. So if you go out of solo mode here, you're going to see we just got our Q cube back, and now you can really quickly make primitive shapes like this one. So here's that little battery pack, and incidentally, I wish I could show you guys, maybe soon I'll be able to show you this thing in action. It's being used in a game right now, and it's not traditional. Like, this thing here doesn't revolve. It's not a revolver. It breaks right here. This whole thing folds down, and then you pop this little cell pack out, and then you pop another one in. So I know it's a little bit misleading in the shape language that it looks like a revolver and should behave like a revolver, but it really doesn't. So it kind of casts against type, I suppose. So if we go here to opacity, we drop this down, we're going to see, okay, we've got a cube here, and it's going to be, you know, there's the barrel width of the gun, and we can kind of start eyeballing this. We go out of X symmetry, hold down Alt, we can scale this in here. And then we also know it looks like it's a cube, but it also has a bevel down here. There's a couple different ways you can do that. You can go to the side here, and if you take these corners as is, let's go ahead and hit X to go across X symmetry here, and bevel them down. It goes to a point. It's probably not what I want, so I'm going to build in something, or I can also go through here with Q mesh and pull this out, and now I can go through here and pull these down. If I want to do it on both sides, I can hold down Control Alt, and then I can just scale these in, and that'll give us a little bit better indication. And I'll go to Custom 1, Shift Z to bring that back, and now I can use my concept to kind of dictate how wide those need to be. And then this is just easy enough to go through there and make that width. Make sense? Everybody good? Thanks for showing up, everybody. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, we're going to be doing a cube brush giveaway. So And I'm not sure exactly when that's going to happen. It's before my wife goes to work, and she usually goes to work around 8. Well, she's going to have to do it before 8 because I have to leave at 8. I have to get off here at 8. So sometime before 8, we're going to do that. Have to be in paint mode and control alt the background color to key it out. Thank you, Anno Bear. So while we're in Spotlight here, you're saying paint mode, control alt the background color, control alt to key it out. Yeah, I'm not really sure, but drag on the background color spotlight to make it disappear. I really don't know. Yeah, anybody have that? Again, and like, hey, I know stuff about ZBrush, and there's stuff. You know what? I probably have an Eat3D video that I made 9 years ago that goes over the spotlight functionality that I'm trying to find right now, and it's right out of my brain. Oh, that's how it goes. With ZModeler crease, when I export the program like 3D Studio Max, the creases are gone. Is there a way to retain it outside of ZBrush? Yes. So what you were going to want to do when you export this outside of ZBrush, use the, at least it works for Maya. I can't speak for 3D Studio Max. I haven't used that program in 5 or 6 years, but in Maya, what you can do, for instance, if I was to go over here and do like crease polygroup, that's under the geometry crease menu, or we can just do like a crease tolerance here. If I export this as an FBX, it will retain that. And how you do that is you go to Z plugin here, FBX export, and then when you go over here, you can do visible or selected. It's selected in this case is what I would do. But you can do visible. It'll do all your visible subtools, and then any creasing you have will retain in the FBX. Also, any vertex color. You know, if you go over here to tool export, it does like an OBJ or any of these. The OBJ export, when you import an OBJ, it won't retain your vertex colors, but if you import an FBX, it will retain your vertex color. So you can bring your poly paint in and out of ZBrush now with the FBX. So use FBX. Sarcasm, are you? I would have modeled into Maya by that moment already. And that's the thing too, is we're going over the basics of ZBrush. So, and also I'm discussing this thing. So if I'm not sitting here talking to people and I'm just taking a cube and modeling it, by all means, use whatever program you want. I prefer to stay in ZBrush and just use ZModeler because, and there's also a lot of nice cool things in ZBrush, like this type of functionality that I can't do in Maya. Not to say Maya's a bad modeler, I use it all the time. But we go to like insert single edge loop here and here, and then I can, you know, alt tap these ones, and then I can just pull this in. So if I'm trying to make these shapes here, that's another option for you. As well as stuff in Maya that's really difficult to do, like insert. You can control multiple edge loops like this. I mean, you can do that in Maya. Let's go ahead and do specified elevation 0. So you can kind of pull this here and then tap here, and then you can alt tap these ones, and then you can go over here to like delete a single poly, and then I can go ahead and like bridge 2 holes here, and I can go ahead and mark this as a spline, or I can tell it, hey, you know what, I want that to be a circle, optimal curvature and optimal resolution. I can just tap and just save that setting right there. So that's really easy to do in ZBrush. As well as if I want to do that on 2 polygons here, I can just do bridge, connected polys, circle, specified curvature 100, 8 triangle sides, and just do stuff like that. So stuff like this would be a pain in the ass to do in Maya, right? Or even punching through objects. If I want to go through here and do like Q mesh, a single poly, and then alt tap these ones and then just pull through, boom, I'm done. I don't have to go delete and bridge and then bridge and then bridge and then bridge, or close holes and then, you know, go and connect these edges up. That would be ridiculous. I can just go through here and be like, gone, you're gone. Oh, you know what, I want to connect these two, so I'll just Q mesh a poly here. If I rotate these around, I can just connect those back up because QMesh will do that for me, and I'll have to bridge them. Another, you know, and even clipping things is pretty easy in ZBrush too. If you want to clip to like a perfect circle, you can just clip these things. Oops, let's do Control Alt here. You can clip to a perfect circle that way. Of course, we're going to need more edge resolution if you want to do that all the way around. But again, just don't confuse me discussing ZModeler and showing you guys the basics with me actually using ZModeler. That's a different story. And it's a lot easier and a lot more controllable than stuff you can do in Maya, as well as this kind of functionality here. So if we hit D to go into dynamic mode, you can do this in Maya. You can hit 1, 2, and 3, and that'll kind of, if you hit 3, it'll kind of go into the sub D mode here. Let's go ahead and do an uncrease all. However, what I tend to do in ZBrush here, I'm going to solo mode here. If I'll go over here and I'll do this crease tolerance here, and in Maya you can do creasing as well. And you do Shift D, you can hop out of this mode. So you can drop our crease tolerance down. There we go. So now we can kind of get this crease going, like so. But in Maya, the creasing is a little bit, I don't know, you have to select the edges and make, oh, the other thing too is polygroups. I love polygroups. Like instead of using selection sets, I can just use polygroups. If I want to change these polygroups, I can just go over here to crease or group by normals. And now I've got all these different faces. Making selection sets in Maya, horrible, terrible. I hate it. Now it's not. And now this is just my opinion. So your mileage may vary. Also, the creasing is a little bit limited. So if I go into Maya and I crease, it's either on or off. You can do crease levels to a certain point, like 1.062, and then when you subdivide, it'll uncrease. I find ZBrush's crease and crease levels much more dynamic and easier to use. So if we go over here to geometry, you're going to see. We have crease levels in here, and then also our dynamic is what we're going to be playing with here. So I've got my crease level set to 15, and my dynamic set to 2. So you're going to see we got faceting over here. So when I preview this at 4, there we go, nice and smooth, but these are very creased. So what I'm going to do is drop my crease level down to 2, smooth subdivision to 4, hop out of there, and now I can kind of dial in those things. And again, it's just a preview. So if I do Shift D, we can still go in here and model this stuff. And then we'll just run another crease tolerance here and then hit D. And it's always going to update with that. If I want my crease level at 3, smooth subdivision to 4, it's going to tighten up those edges just a little bit. Alternatively, you could also, let's go here and initialize this thing. Q cube here, and then we'll do unify. So another alternative to that is instead of doing, if you're just doing hard surface stuff like this shape right here, and I guess we could use this, we can go over here to our crease level. Instead of turning on dynamic with smooth subdivs where it averages the vertices, we're going to turn smooth subdivs down to 0. We'll use Q grid. So we can turn Q grid up to like 2 or 3. We can change the coverage. So we're getting kind of an automatic built-in bevel, and you can use chamfer, bevel, or both. And you can change those values here. So what you can do now is while you're going through and Q meshing this stuff, as long as you're keeping it, if you just know you're going to be modeling like mech stuff or very QB stuff, you can just go through here and then start Q modeling the stuff out. Let's see, Q model this out, and then you don't have to do that. You can go like Q mesh polygroup all or polygroup island. If you do polygroup all the polygroups you have available to you will start Q meshing out. If you go to polygroup island, you can go through here and do this, and then through here you can do like polygroup, poly loop, and now we have a selection set here that I can now Q mesh polygroup island and just do this type of thing. And while we're doing that, we're maintaining that bevel that we have. I can do Shift D, turns it off. I can do D again, turns it back on. You can go through here and modify it. So a lot of flexibility and functionality through there. Also, if you want to go through here and say, I want to poke a hole through here, so I'm going to go to split point. You can split a point here. If you want to split another point that's the exact same size, again, just tap through here, and now you can do Q mesh polygroup all, and now you just pull this back through, that kind of thing, and then you can hit D. And now this, in this particular case, since this is a round object, the Q grid is not going to work that well, so this is where I would go from Q grid to a smooth subdiv, and then I would just do a crease tolerance here. And then I would go in here and play with my crease level. So I'd like crease level of 3, smooth subdiv of 4. And now I get a nice bevel on my object here, and those circles are nice and round. So, just in case. Bevel instead of creasing. Crease is always disappear my export and import software. Yeah, and like I said, creasing and exporting is FBX. That will show up in Maya, so you're fine. And then ZBrush, yeah, so ZBrush's UVs, they're very artist friendly, which is a good thing and a bad thing. If you need to do very specific UVs in ZBrush, I don't really, I'll UV in ZBrush when it's artist friendly and it just does its thing, and it makes sure I don't have an overlapping UVs, and I don't really care too much about my UV layout. If I need to do very specific UV layout stuff, ZBrush probably isn't my program. But Fusion 360, if you go to my YouTube channel here, I've got a Fusion 3, or my QBrush or my Gumroad page. I've got a Fusion 360 quick start you can check out. And again, these things aren't better or worse. It's just different. You know, there's a lot of things I would do in ZBrush that I wouldn't do in Fusion. There's a lot of things I would do in Fusion that I wouldn't do in ZBrush. Although with the new live Boolean system, that's becoming less and less. But I would never tell anybody just use one thing, or this is the only program you can use. That really, really limits you. And throughout my career, the the path is littered with people who say this is the only program you can use to model, and then everything changes in this industry every 4 years, give or take. So like the time it took you to graduate high school, the entire industry's done a 180. Now it's more or less accurate. Some generation changes are more intense than others, like going from previous gen to next gen on this last, like the Xbox, the first Xbox to, or whatever Xbox there was, to the Xbox 360 was a pretty big leap. The PS2 to the PS3 was a pretty big leap because, you know, shaders and layered shaders and normal maps and material properties came into play. So that was a huge leap. And if you were one of the people that were like, or even more recently, the only way you can texture something is to UV it and texture it in Photoshop. I haven't used Photoshop to texture something in at least 5 years. Like, I haven't even touched it. Like, I'll use Photoshop for text if I want to do marketing stuff, but I sure as hell don't use it for texturing. Now, it's not to say you can't or that you shouldn't. I'm just saying to make blanket statements like you have to do this or this is better than this, or you'll always be proven wrong every time. But I also do, oh, you know what? I didn't, if you go to my live stream highlights, I go over Maya. I use the K-Tools. Let's see if I can find it here. I use Maya K-Tools. It's a Boolean tool system setup. So yeah, here we go, Maya Booleans. So I talk a little bit about, you know, modeling in Maya and kind of doing the same thing with K-Tools and ADN tools to kind of accomplish some of the live Boolean functionality. And there are some things that are a little bit limited with ZBrush live Booleans. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. But there are, like, this kind of stuff would be difficult to do in ZBrush and also go back and bevel, because in order to make this a live object, I'd have to make a union mesh. And by the time I make it a union mesh, I get a lot of triangulation. So adding a bevel to that is kind of a pain. So there are some definite drawbacks, but you can always just use a workaround or, you know, do stuff in other programs. I would never say that you have to do everything in ZBrush. The reason I use ZBrush is because I'm able to do it quick and fast, and it's a little bit more TV friendly. Like, I can do Pickle Rick in 2 hours, whereas if I was to try to model Pickle Rick in another program, it'd probably take me longer than that, and it wouldn't be all that fun to watch, honestly. Don't know why Mike only reads the YouTube chat. I read all the chats. Here's my chat. So, give me a second. Give me a minute. I'm using Restream. So, Maya's most used for animation, not hard surface modeling. That's the other thing too. I've seen people who modeled stuff for movies, hard surface, that use Maya, like Avatar. You know, they use Maya for modeling. Not they. Some people did. Some people didn't. And even at Certain Affinity where I work, nobody cares what you model in. They really don't. All they care about, I mean, we have to go through Maya because our animation pipeline goes through Maya, and I've yet to work on a studio project that didn't go through animation, or Maya is the animation pipeline. So that kind of dictates how we get things into Engine. So you need to know a little bit of Maya, but as far as hard-edge modeling, man, you can use whatever you want. Cool. And again, if I miss something, just keep shouting it out. And also 3D Studio Max. It's like everybody in my studio, like Modo and 3D Studio Max, Maya and ZBrush. There's so many good modelers, and at my studio, I'm like mid-tier modeler. I'm not a super great modeler. There's really, really good modelers at our studio who use all sorts of cool stuff. Cool. Everybody good? What do you predict will happen in a couple of years in the industry? I have a feeling that Houdini is going to make some inroads if other 3D programs don't catch up. There's some really, really exciting stuff that's going on in Houdini That is mind-blowing. So what I need to do is get off my butt and learn Houdini, because I feel like I'm already falling behind in Houdini. There's amazing things happening in Houdini that's just, I'm getting kind of nervous that I don't know it. I noticed you, Zoradium. Okay. Always confused about the film industry. They use Crease open subdiv workflow, or is it subd modeling? That I don't know. I've never been in the film industry. I know some places use like NURBS, and kind of Fusion 360 is kind of NURB-ish. Like CAD programs are kind of NURBY. As far as what goes in, usually if you're, depending on the renderer you use, if it wants to do like automatic tessellation, it's a little bit easier if you have NURB surfaces. Just like in Keyshot, we were doing Keyshot automatic tessellation, and if you had a NURB surface, it would tessellate just fine. Polygon surfaces, it didn't, so you'd have to smooth the normals and round the edges. So that I don't know. You'd have to research that, but cool. Oh, nice. Lead animator for Avatar. That's cool. It's animated belt without box modeling retopol by using brush clay build. Will it turn out a bit wanky and uneven? There's a way to even it and make it more clean without retopologizing. Belt clay buildup. Yeah, so when you're starting to get into sculpting stuff, like using clay buildup to, let's do that real quick. Little tangent here, sorry. And this could be part one, since we've only gotten to step 5 in the article here. Step 5 out of step 5 out of 28. So we'll do some more of this, but these are good questions. So what I'm going to do is let's hit the comma key here. We'll go to tool, old Nick Z. So speaking of industry pros, Nick Zuccarello, I used to work with him at EA Tiburon in Orlando. He teaches in Florida now, and I use this tool all the time. So thanks, Nick. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these other things. Or you could have just selected him and said delete other. That probably would have been a better choice. But so anyway, so we got this guy here. I'm also going to go in here. If you haven't played with this one, you can also turn on these layers here. Turn them on and off and kind of get those things. If you don't want those, just go ahead and hit bake all. And now when we go in here, you know what? Let's just go ahead and Dynamesh this guy down. So we're going to go ahead and say, okay, I want to sculpt a belt. And you know what I sometimes like to do? Let's Dynamesh this a little bit higher. Let's hit Control D. There you go. So turn off blur resolution here. So we have this Dynamesh here. And sometimes what I like to do if I'm just doing concept-y stuff is I'll duplicate this off. And then I'll go into my deformation menu. I'll do inflate -1. And then I'll go ahead and inflate that down. If I go out of solo mode, you're going to see, here's my selected. Did I do that? -1, enter. There we go. So I inflated this thing of -1. It's still a Dynamesh here. So now I can go through here, and it's, you know, your mileage may vary. This may be dumb for you, but what I'll sometimes like to do is just kind of concept stuff on top of here. All I'm really doing is just sculpting on here, but I can kind of see it a little bit better. If I want to go back to my original base mesh, it's there available to me. I don't have to store a morph target or a layer or be like, oops, let me smooth this back out. I'll just have a duplicate off of there. So when I'm doing this kind of stuff and I'm making a belt, like say I want to make this type of shape here, this can be very difficult to be like, okay, let's convert this. So what I would have, and make it nice. So what I'd have to do is like, okay, mask this off and Dynamesh. You could also take some cylinders and kind of mush them around. Honestly, what I prefer to do, and I know you said without Z modeling. Well, let's not use Z modeler, but let's use another technique. So what I'm going to do is a BTO, brush topology brush. I'm going to turn off X symmetry because I'm going to go across this midline. And the reason I do that is I don't feel like getting in here and like, it gets, Z modeler or the topology brush gets a little squirrely when you're going down the midline. So I'm just going to mirror this later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a line here, and I'll drag a line here, and I'm going to drag a line over and around. And basically what I'm doing is just making this belt. And I know you said no Z modeler, but this is just, it's such a much easier way to get what you're going after that I just want to show you this. So now you can just go through here and start making these lines. And I'm just crossing this geometry over. And then as I go up, I can just continue this line up just by starting at the end of that line here. And you could use Z-sphere topology for this too. I might be inclined to do that. as well. But for now, topology brush is also super easy. So if you don't want to go through multiple steps, this will probably work for you. So if I can cross over here and I can hold down Alt and drag, that'll go ahead and clean up my mesh. And now I can do a little bit of a better job connecting these two. So I can connect this one to this one to this one. And now you can see wherever the orange shows up, I'm going to have geometry showing up. Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep. There we go. So we've got our belt shape here. Now if I just tap off my object here, you're going to start seeing a belt come into play. If I do Control Z, make my brush size bigger, and I'm just tapping S to make my brush size bigger and smaller. And you can tap. That'll give you a nice thick belt on here. If you want to, I know you said no Z modeler. I'm going to use Z modeler, but I'm going to show you why, because I think it'll help you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush size down to 1 and I tap, and now it's just going to be a single-sided mesh here. So what I can do is do a split masked points, and then I'll split this into its own subtool here. So now I have nice low-res geometry. Now again, I only made one side here, but I went across that midline. So what I have to do now is I can do a quick mirror and weld. That's deformation mirror across the x-axis, and then geometry modify topology mirror and weld. And that'll give you that option. Now you're also going to see it's creased in the middle. I'm going to go to my geometry crease options and then just do uncrease all. I don't need creases on there just yet. So now I've got that geo here. If I go into transparency mode, I can go in here to move. You know what else? You see how it's kind of flipping and flopping around? I prefer to have preferences, edit, turn off align cursor to surface. So now what we can do is I can hit X to go across X symmetry, and now I can just kind of move these things into place and kind of match my concept a little bit better. And the reason I'm doing all this is just to show you, and again, I'm doing a lot of talking, so again, don't confuse this with like, wow, it takes you forever. It really doesn't. You can also go through, if you want to even these out, you can go to slide edge, and you can just kind of slide these edges around here a little bit. Or you can, if you want to get more resolution here, you go to insert single edge loop, and you can punch that in. If you want to insert a single edge loop with a little bit of a bounce to it, you can crank the Z intensity up just a bit, and that'll go ahead and add a little curvature to it. Or again, just like we did earlier, you can go to insert multiple edge loops, and you can just pull. Oh, you have to do interactive elevation. You can just kind of pull in or pull out like that. Then hit Control W. And the whole reason I'm going through this is just because if we get, I can go ahead and delete this one here. So if we go to insert single edge loop, hold down Alt, that'll get rid of that one. You could also go to delete edge, but that's kind of a wasted button click. Anyway, we have this shape here, and we're kind of cleaning it up because the whole result we want to get is a belt, QMesh, all polygons, that does something like this. On a solo mode here. Now if we hit D, that's going to give us our dynamic subdivisions. If you do crease polygroup, that's going to be your geometry crease menu. That's going to crease all your polygroups. Of course, we're not getting these tight edges, so in this case, I would probably go into my crease tolerance. It's under your crease menu here. Just drop this crease tolerance down and then hit crease, and now you'll get those edges here. Now you're going to get a little bit of pinching on here. All you got to do while you're in dynamic is go through here, insert single edge loop. You can kind of just add some control loops through here, or you can just go through here and you can like crease this edge here. Now this is where I would start building in, go out of polyframe mode here. So see how they're super crispy? This is where I'd go like, okay, smooth subdiv of 4, crease level of 3, and then just start building in a little bit of softer edges here. Now, realistically, I would probably have this belt coming down, buckle in here, and then this belt going around. They'd be two separate objects, but this is just a little bit more of a complex way to go about that. Once you don't need your concept sculpt anymore, you can just hold down, you can have that showing. You can go through here with like your clay brush or your clay buildup and just knock this back down. Let's turn on X. Or if you don't need it at all, let's go ahead and delete it. And now you've got a nice little belt on this dude. You can go here, here, and just kind of do the last little bit of thing. So again, I know that took me a while to explain, but when you're just getting in the mode, or you're just doing like simple straps, BTO, it's just you just go through here and you're like here to here, and depending on how complex your straps are ended up being, you can just tap off, go ahead and also, you could also just dial in a little bit of thickness in here, go ahead and split mask points. This inherited my dynamic properties, so if I go down here and just hit crease, there we go. So we've already got the crease properties set up, and we've already got a strap on here. So this way, you'll get nice clean straps. And if you want to make these things thicker or thinner, If you hold down Alt here, you're going to see you have an outside polygroup, an inside polygroup, and a middle polygroup. So all I got to do is go down here to Q Mesh Polygroup All. If you start Q meshing, if I do Shift D, it's going to add an edge loop in here. If you hold down Shift, it'll just pull along those surface normals. So now you can just make it a little bit thicker, if that's what you want it to look like a little He-Man costume or something like that. Or if you want to add more edge loops, just feel free to do that. And then just, you know, pop your crease back on there. And then, oh, and also on here, let's see, I would do something like insert single edge loop. You can go ahead and delete these loops. And then if you do insert multiple, that'll give you alternating polygroups. You can turn that off in the settings. But if you want that, because sometimes you might want to do like Q Mesh Polygroup All, do something like that, or the opposite. This is also something that's kind of difficult to do in some 3D programs, is doing that inverted extrude can sometimes get a little squirrely. So that kind of stuff. And again, if I miss any comments, I apologize. I've got a lot of comments coming in. Yes. And my 28's getting a lot better modeling tools. Over the past couple of years, they've gotten leaps and bounds better. If you only wanted to sculpt, texture, render, and didn't care about proper UV topology, what pipeline is the least tedious? What I use for that is either Keyshot, or if you go to my YouTube channel here, and you go to my live stream highlights, I keep going to my live stream highlights. If you scroll down, you're going to see I use the painter workflow where I basically export FBX with my high. There's a faster way you can get your low res. I'll go over that some other time. But you can basically do a high to a low res and just start texturing stuff in Painter. So this process here we did on live, where we did our high res, our low res, baked our maps, and then we just hopped into Painter. And then just really quickly, just having fun, just texturing the stuff. And then the other cool thing is they've got a built-in iRay render. And now iRay render, you're going to want a nice GPU because it's going to use your GPU to render. But do I take it into iRay? Thought I did. Oh, here we go. So the cool thing is you can just throw this into iRay as well. And it's kind of like a built-in Keyshot render kind of ish, or an Octane. It's also similar to, if you use Fusion 360, they have a really nice renderer as well. You don't even have to, you can throw it into Keyshot if you'd like, but they got a pretty decent renderer. So you can see, this is just like concept previs. And you got like paint on here that's kind of bumped out, and cool, gross, crusty metal. And so this could just be a concept piece that you take in and paint over if you wanted to, or whatever. It just takes an hour to model, maybe. Or if you got kit bash pieces, take you 5 minutes to model this thing. I was just going over techniques. And then throw it into a render. So in 20 minutes, you could have something like this fully painted up. And you could throw it into Engine too. That's the even better part, is instead of just painting over it and handing it off to somebody, just throw it into Engine and see if it works. That's kind of where my head's at recently, is just getting stuff in. There's no point in being like, well, let's do a mood painting of this robot. Just make a robot and put it in game and make sure it works. We can do mood paintings later, or, I don't know, call outs later. Makes more sense. Okay. Oh, by the way, if you're just joining us, if you go over here to the ZBrush Central, if you do ZBrush Central beta testers, Google ZBrush 4R8 beta testers, you can go down to page 4, and then this is kind of what we're going over, as well as what we're really going over is NCG Magazine issue number 32. The person on Facebook who asked me what article or what issue it was, it is number 32. And it's in Chinese, but I'm going to do a video companion piece, which is where we left off. Let's see where we left off here. Anyway, so let's see if I can find, I'm going to go over to Load Tool, and we're going to do Date Modified here, and Gun Bake Demo, ZBrush Painter. Let's see where this left off. I'm trying to see if I have an earlier version of this thing that kind of dictates. Okay, so this stuff's all kind of rebuilt. So this, if I go into solo mode here, so like we were doing the ZModeler stuff, this is what these ZModeler objects start out as. It's just nothing, you know. This one is a little bit more complicated here. And probably looking at this, what I did was sculpt and then rebuild. Same thing for this handle here. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's go back to our sculpt here. So if I'm going to do anything organic or a little bit more complicated than just straight up this type of shape here, and we kind of went off the deep end when we were doing ZModeler stuff, but you get the point. So if I do Shift Z to bring this thing back, 37. You go to see document. What was I doing? Oh yeah, so we're gonna do the handle. Anything that's, if I hit Z and then we bring this opacity back. So see how this is like, it's trimmed in and then it kind of smooths out to this nice broad shape and then it does something weird in here. I will absolutely, and this is another reason why I love ZBrush, is I can tackle problems from multiple solutions. So I can just go in and sculpt it first and then rebuild it. So let's do a little bit of that. So I'm gonna go Z, drop this opacity down here. There we go. And then we can, of course, go to our Z plugin. We'll draw our document over here, and then we've got our custom one. And you could assign a hotkey to that, I suppose, but that's okay. So now I do have this cube just sitting out here. So I'm going to do Shift D to go out of dynamic mode, and then I will hold down Alt to move this into place, and then I can go to like snap to mesh center, and I'll move this down. Then let's say I'm going to make this handle really quickly. So I'll kind of get the base shape of what I want. Instead of Z-modeling this thing though, Z-modeling, I can just, it doesn't really matter because what I'm going to do is just turn this into a Dynamesh. So I'll just take, you know what, I don't even need this thing, like just, I don't know, I don't care. Mike, what are you doing? Just make this shape. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn off blur, turn off project, just hit Dynamesh and get a nice Dynamesh here. It's 342,000. If I want to work a little bit lower, I can drop that resolution down, control drag. If you control drag and it doesn't do anything, just tap your object a little bit and then control drag, it'll update it. Now in this case, what I can use is just use like clip curve to go, okay, I'm going to make, and just to make this a little bit simpler of a demo and not do this whole weirdo big shape I have back here, I'm just going to say, I'm going to go up to this point. And then, so I'm just going to use clip. Now, clip can sometimes be a little bit squirrely too, not necessarily in this case, but what might be a better option here, let me see if I can, okay, so for instance, if I clip this straight down, it looks like, oh, did a great job, right? And then you go here and you're like, wait, what is that? And I Dynamesh it, and there's like a little thin strip here. What it's basically doing is pulling those polygons straight down, and if these polygons go straight down, it's hovering over nothing. So it's going to pull 10,000 polygons just in a straight line. So instead of doing that, what you can also do is trim curve. And what that's going to do is make a straight line. It's going to slice and then fill a hole. Now, fill hole operations don't do it in symmetry, so that's where I would just do a geometry, modified topology, mirror, and weld. But it also gives you another polygroup, so that's kind of nice. So instead of clipping, I will sometimes just go in here and use trim curve. And so there's the, it looks like a magazine kind of pops out of the bottom here. Of course, this is a sci-fi energy gun, and this isn't a revolver, so, and I'm not really a concept artist. I just play one on TV, so, you know, this isn't the best concepted weapon. I admit that. Immediately, wholeheartedly admit that. But we have our basic shape here. And then now at this point, I might feel more comfortable once I have my basic shape to go in here and use my clip to kind of go, okay, here. And I can always just clean up the clip later. I just wanted to show you guys what I was talking about. Now, when I'm clipping, if I hold down Control Shift, I can use my space bar to move this thing around. If I hold down Control Shift and I tap Alt once, that'll give me like a nice Bezier curve. So you can tap Alt once and then tap Alt again, and just keep tapping Alt once to kind of trim through here. If you hold down Control Shift and tap twice, you'll get nice, clean cuts like that. So kind of dial in what you're looking for. So that's the basic shape, right? And I just Dynamesh this thing. These little knobby things I can always build in later. I'm just trying to get the basic shape here. And if I'm going to do this for real, I'd probably like make a shape like this so it looks like nice and settled in there, right? So if I go out of, hit Shift Z to go out of that mode, you're going to see, whoa, we're way too big. So probably I'd have more of the gun built, so I would have a better idea of how wide this thing needed to be. Excuse me. I want to do a lot of talking and drinking water. I would have a better idea of how wide the thing is make it, but I'm just going to go ahead and eyeball it here. So, and I'm always just control dragging to re-Dynamesh the stuff. So in order to get this shape here, I would just sculpt it first and then rebuild it. So just really quickly, and here, let's talk another thing about Spotlight. So let's say I'm in Spotlight and I'm like, you know what, I've got a perfect reference image right here. So if I just want to put this reference image up here, let me just do that and let me just start sculpting. And then you're going to go down here and start sculpting and be like, hey, nothing's happening. So you got to go over here. Oh boy, was it brush samples? Yes. Go over to brush samples. You're going to see Spotlight projection is turned on. What that means is Spotlight's only going to work if your mesh is behind this Spotlight thing. So if I do Spotlight here and turn down on opacity, if I now go over in here to my clay buildup, it works. And then as soon as you go out of Spotlight, it doesn't. That's a feature. Usually when you're using Spotlight, it's way down here and it covers your whole screen, so you're able to model no problem, or sculpt no problem, as well as this turns on this functionality where, just like we did earlier, do we still have that? Yeah, just like we did this extraction earlier, where we just basically painted this on there. This is super useful. If you wanted to start modeling or sculpting on this thing, what I would do is go over here to RGB, turn your RGB intensity down, make a white color, go to color fill object, and just knock that back. So you can see where the details need to go, but it's not in the way. And then you can just go in here, you can Z modeler, you can go in here and clay brush, clay buildup on here. Now the problem is I can't sculpt because Spotlight's up here. So what I do is turn off Spotlight projection, and now I can sculpt no problem. The only problem is if I wanted to paint, it's not going to paint, it's not going to pull through Spotlight at all. It completely turned that functionality off. So if you want that back, just go turn that back on. But now at this point you can go through here and be like, okay, I'm going to take this here, this little divot here, I'm going to unmask, and then I'm just going to like mask this in, and then go to unmask mesh center, hold down Alt, and then pull this in, and maybe scoot this, let's scoot this back here, and then pull this side in like this. So already you can go through here and you can clip the stuff out, you can divide these things out, you can go through here and be like, oh, I want a little recess in here, so you can mask this in. So you can do a lot of work just with like sculpting, like we were saying with the belt. You know, how would you want to sculpt this thing? And you hold down Control. You can hold down Control and blur, or Control Alt and sharpen it up, and then you can go through here and like clean up with your mask. So I would never tell you you have to do this method in ZBrush. Do whatever you want, man. Let's see, blur, turn up this resolution here. So we can just Dynamesh this thing now. So now this thing is completely Dynameshed. We still have our polypaint on here. If you Dynamesh with your polypaint off, it'll get rid of it. If you have your polypaint on when you Dynamesh, it'll hold it. We go on down there into Shift. I'm going to go to Smooth Stronger. You can just kind of smooth this out. Now, if you want to smooth your mesh but not your polypaint, hold down Shift and turn off RGB. And now you can just smooth out your model without that. So now we can go through here. Oh, this is so much fun. We can just go ahead and mask this trigger out. And we can hold down Control, go into Mask Lasso. Invert that mask, maybe sharpen up a little bit. Hold down Alt, go to Unmask Mesh Center, and then just, because we know triggers are pretty thin, right? There you go. Now we have a little thin trigger in here. So already, if we go into solo mode, turn off polypaint, we're already starting to kind of dial in how our weapon's going to look here. Also in this part here, let's go back to mask pin. You can start blocking in this shape here if we know it's going to be Control tap to invert that. If we know it's going to be thinner right here, let's go ahead and turn on X symmetry, and then we can just clip these things back. Or we could probably, even what's probably going to be more accurate is like maybe clip it to an angle. And clip that in, and then, or you know, if we wanted this to be beveled out, we could just protect it, and then go through here and clip it in. So start dialing in your shapes like that. Super cool, super fun. And if you wanted to completely replace something, what I might do is I can go in here and hit Control W, make this all one polygroup. So what I'm going to do is go through here. I'm going to do Slice Curve. And we're going to, I want to turn on polyframe. Let's turn off line. There we go. So we've got this Dynamesh here. And let's say I want to cut out this thing because I'm going to replace it with with a cylinder, right? So I want to keep Dynameshing and figuring this stuff out, but I want to get rid of this chunk right here. To do a nice clean cut, you could do a Dynamesh. Probably would be easier is just to, okay, let's do this. Let's go ahead and insert cube. I have a custom cube here for my custom brushes, but you can just do brush BI, what we did earlier, brush insert primitives. Oops, I don't know what I hit there. We can just pop a little cube on here, and then with this cube we can do a subtractive mesh. So we can go through here and just like cut this whole piece out like that. We'll do that first. So now with this one, you're going to see we have polyframe turned on. Let's go ahead and we want to keep our polypaint on, but this one we want to make a subtractive mesh. Now I can split this off, hit this little icon, make a subtractive, merge it down, and do that. I can also go down here to my polygroup menu and do group as Dynamesh sub, control drag, and that'll go ahead and just cut that piece out. And then if you need to do a little bit of cleanup work, you can go through here and just like clean this up. So now we've got a Dynamesh working mesh, and then you can start dictating like little easy pieces to go and change. And we've already kind of done this. If we go to solo mode here, let's go ahead and match this with the size we're working at. And while we're Z-modeling, if you want to use this mesh instead of, you know, using your image, by all means. There's, again, I'm not going to tell you one way to do it. Whatever's easier for you. So there we go. So now, if I go to transparency mode, you're going to see, okay, we've replaced that one piece here. And let's go ahead and just do like a crease tolerance here in dynamic. Actually, a crease tolerance isn't going to work that well. We'll turn line back on. I'm going to do a crease edge loop complete here, 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 and here. Now when I hit D, we'll get nice smooth lines, and then I can go turn this back on. And let's turn these off. So again, another slight tangent, but again, use everything at ZBrush at your disposal, whatever you think works best for you. You can go through here and start doing this. Now the cool thing about this is if I have a handle over here and I just break this thing off, then I want to rebuild it and make it a nice sub D, which is kind of what we're doing here. Let's go ahead and hold down Shift. So if you have all your subtools turned on and you just want to isolate maybe these bottom two, hold down Shift, touch the eyeball, that'll turn everything off, touch this little nameplate, touch that eyeball, and now you're working with those two subtools. But we just wanted to work with that one, so little subtool organization 101. And we'll do Shift Z. So we were kind of like, okay, we've eyeballed this, going back to what we were working on earlier. We eyeballed this handle, we have a Dynamesh on here. Now I want to make this basic shape. So this is where it's easier for me, and again, your mileage may vary. But for me, it's a lot easier to go in here for these type of shapes and just do, let's go ahead and do a little bit of smooth, kind of take the edge off. And we can go through here and I can eyeball this, and because we turned spotlight projection off in our samples here, we can just simply go through here and like kind of build in a little, we're using trim dynamic, and then we can make our brush size bigger and then a bigger trim dynamic here. If we want to even, we can go to the top and then we can say, you know what, I want this to go to a nice, so I'm going to take my clip brush, tap Alt once, we'll go to a nice smooth transition right down here. So between these two, I can just use my smooth brush and then maybe my trim dynamic and then maybe my H polish. And now we just transition from a thinner edge to a thicker edge. If I want to go in here and tighten this up, I can go in here to my pinch brush and I can just pinch this together. So I can go like, okay, I want this to go a little bit thinner to thicker. And then when I get thicker, I want this to really broaden out. So that's just easier for me to figure out really quickly. And even while I was talking about it, you can see how quickly that can go, rather than sitting there and Z-modeling it and trying to get this thing to work in subdivisions, right? Because I can just go through here and smooth it and be like, okay, tighter to softer. And then on the front here, you know, this is the back of the grip. So, you know, first thing I would probably do is just go through and clip through this. Speaking of, even on this concept here, on weapons, it's a lot, like most weapons aren't just like, oh, big boxy thing. You can just go to the back here and just like, I'm almost immediately just clip that thing down to a shape like this. This is usually a lot more representative of how guns and weapons are made, this type of look. Of course, you'd want to split this off first before you clip something like this, but see how I get that nice transition shape here? Split it off into its own separate piece and then just start clipping from the back and you'll be in pretty good shape probably. Anyway, same thing for the handle that we're working on here. Like from the front here, that's our shape. I'm just going to make my camera go to about here, so we're going looking straight back. And then we want a nice curved area for where we put our fingers, so we can kind of dial that in. And oops, hold down Alt. And sometimes see how it kind of bends back in. So sometimes I'll go Control Shift, I'll drag it at an angle, and then hold down Alt, and that'll give me a little bit more leeway here. So something like this, although this little bumpy thing comes out, but then I miss all of this down here. So what I can do is I can get that out of the way just by getting rid of visibility. And then I can go through here and really clip the hell out of this bottom one here. Oops. Control Shift, switch back to clip curve here. There we go. And again, come in at an angle and then hold down Alt. And then you just do a really nice soft curve and then bring that back. So if you wanted it to go from a corner transition to where you kind of put your fingers, you can do that. But really looking at this now, I'm thinking something more like this. Oops. Yeah. And then if you want to add those little wobbly things in here, this is again where you could come in with your standard brush and just build it in. Or you could insert a cylinder or a sphere-ender or a sphere and blob it out and then Dynamesh it together. But this worked fine. Dynamesh all this together. We have Dynamesh turned on. So now you can go over here to H-Polish here and get these shapes going. Okay, so, oh, here you go. Let's see, everybody good? And again, I apologize. Any recommendations for starting out in Houdini? Gianvito Serra has a good YouTube channel. I should have, let me see if I have anything really quickly for you guys. Okay. Come see me before you leave. Okay, thanks. Because I said. So Synology. That's not it. Do I have a... On my computer here, I need to grab my bookmarks, but I do have some Houdini stuff. I'll get back to you on that one. Cool, cool. And again, if I miss comments, I'm having to scroll through a bunch here. I've had this weird problem where in ZBrush where I turn on the polyframes with live Boolean, there's these little weird gray stripes over certain subtools. Any suggestions? Yes, that's also a feature. Well, we're going to get into live Booleans later on in this demo, but just to show you what that's doing, if I do like a start group here, and then a subtractive mesh here, and then go out of solo mode, turn everything back on. We go to our live Boolean here. You're going to see how that clips through, and this is a live Boolean, so I can just move this handle around and it'll just dynamically clip through. If I turn on polyframe, what that's doing is showing you the polyframe, and you can turn off your lines if you want to, and also the fill. So this is the object here that you can kind of see. So what you want to do while you're working, it's useful because what you can do is turn on polyframe, and then you can see your object, and you can kind of dictate like, oh, there's where it starts cutting in. So if I just want to cut out that middle shape here, I can turn that off, and now I can see what I'm doing. It's just nice to see your object sometimes, so that's a feature to turn that on. To control that, I'm not sure if there is I'm not positive there's a control for that. What you can do is just turn off polyframe, and then it just goes away. Another thing to watch out for, well, that doesn't really happen anymore, but what used to happen is you can go over here to this move multiple subtools. So if you hold down Control Shift, what you can do is you can also be able to grab multiple subtools at the same time. But what used to happen was you would have a couple, and then you go out of that mode, it would stay hatched. Now it just maintains your selection in here, so that's kind of nice. But we haven't done that yet. So I'm not sure how to fix that, but it is a feature, so... Yeah, Bryce 3D. Do some sweet chessboard renders. Specific feature makes keyshot rendering better than Systems Painter Iray render. Specific feature? No. But I mean, if I go into Iray, I can't sit there and like drag and drop stuff. Transparency, glass rendering might not be as good. So there's just a lot of drawbacks. Like if I'm gonna do just like what we did in this video here, this ZBrush to Keyshot bridge. You know, if I just want to make a cup of coffee and do that in Iray, it took me a few minutes to do in Substance. Oh, and even a better one. So this like cup of beer. Let's see that. Let me turn this down. So like it just took me a few minutes to go through here and model the mug and then put some liquid in there. And then even when we were doing the bubbles in ZBrush with Nanomesh was really super easy. And then throwing those properties into Keyshot, it was just pretty easy. And then throwing labels on there, all of this stuff I wouldn't be able to do with the Iray render in Painter and labels and stuff, because I'd have to bake it into the texture or do a decal with transparency, and that gets weird. So, you know, and it's not a drawback, it's just a little bit more work. So this workflow worked very well for what I was doing or trying to accomplish here, but your mileage may vary. So let's see. Yep. You don't need Keyshot if you have Substance Painter. It depends on what you want to do. Like what I just explained. Sorry, I didn't read your question before I started spouting off, but you know. How do you combine all these small pieces into one that's being loaded into Engine? That goes into that live stream stuff, and we'll do a little bit more of that. There's a few more techniques that I didn't go over, or optimization techniques for dynameshing all your objects at the same resolution, decimating all your objects at the same percentage, and then exporting that. That's a little bit faster than what I did. But again, if you go to the live stream highlights, boy, where's my brain? Playlist. Live stream highlights here. Go down to where you start seeing robots under here. And that goes to the game res process and baking process. Ernie and I forget the other guy's name. Ernie. Look for Ernie. Solution to ZBrush scaling things wrong, going from Maya to ZBrush and back, it comes in much smaller in the wrong place. Shouldn't come in the wrong place, but where that's being controlled, and Joseph Dress has some good stuff on this on the Pixellogic YouTube channel. If you go over here to geometry, size, and position, you can see, you know, X, Y, and Z positions, and then your X, Y, Z size, and then that size right here is being controlled also, or multiplied by this scale in your export and possibly your import. I don't know. But when you go hopping back and forth, if you want to really control your scale, you can go to Z plugin here. There's a scale master. I don't use this a lot, but that's another option for you. I'm trying to think, like, if there's easy ways to. Scale Master is probably your best bet, but I do know sometimes ZBrush can behave a little bit weird. It's because it's trying to make everything a native ZBrush size so that it knows where everything is and ensure that the tools and everything in the ZBrush interface works correctly with your tool, and not have it so humongous, like, and when you bring in objects as an OBJ, there's no real scale applied to it. There's just unit values. So one thing I've modeled projects in Maya where it's like, oh, every unit is a meter. And then everything is really tiny. So you've got a character on screen that's like 1.5 units tall. And then I've worked on other projects where you import those and it's like, oh, this object, every unit is a centimeter. And then now I've got a person, or I've got a character that's thousands of times bigger than the entire world of the other game. So those kind of arbitrary units can sometimes throw you for a loop. I don't know. That's a tough one. And again, if I missed something, I'm doing a really quick scroll through here. And also making a bounding box that's exported could also work. A very simple model. I'm trying to make a cake, but it has a slope, and I want to know if you send a picture of the cake, you can demonstrate how to make the front of the cake. I know it's simple. Yeah, send it to me, and I'll add it to my live stream topics. Cool. What's the difference between trim dynamic and flat brushes? So that's a good question. I haven't used the flat brushes in a while. So I used to use flattened brushes all the time when I was on DC Universe Online, because that was before any of these hard surface, like the H polish and the trim dynamic stuff, even existed. But so brush, BF, flatten. I really don't know off the top of my head. Like, it's similar. Yeah, use flatten. Flatten's nice. Like an old friend. I do know that, so trim dynamic, if you go in here to, it kind of explains a little bit. Brush. Modifiers? No. Surface? No. Where's my... Okay, samples. So see how preserve edge and stuff and all these little samples are set up. So if I go between trim dynamic and H polish, see how those change. So with trim dynamic, what I can do is see how it sees that edge, and I can just cut right across these edges here. If I go into H polish, it's going to see that edge and it's going to respect that edge. So I kind of work between these two. I'll take H polish to kind of refine my surfaces, and then I'll use smooth to kind of round out things, or use my clip brush. But then if I want to bevel these edges, that's where I would have to go in here with trim dynamic and just drop a bevel on here. Now, this isn't to say this is my final model. We haven't gotten to the part that I wanted to get to yet. I think we're getting close. I think she's going to come see me. about the cube brush thing. So if you're, I'm going to have Aaron scroll through and just kind of pick somebody here and just pick a name from random. And then if you can message me your email address, or you know what, I'll send out my email address and you can just email it to me. I'll send it over QBrush and you'll get your prize. So let's see, we got this here. We were talking about turn dynamic. So at this point you would want to Z-remesh this thing if this is the basic shape you want. And again, it was just a little bit complex for me going from hard to soft, but now what I would do is rebuild this. You could use BTO, which is what we've gone over before, just like rebuilding this thing. But what I would prefer to do in this case is go in here and I would go to Insert, Z-Sphere. Now a pen would throw it at the bottom. Insert puts it right beneath. If I hold down Shift, I just want to see this Z-Sphere and this object we want to retopologize. Hold down Shift, touch that eyeball, touch the nameplate for the Z-Sphere, touch that little handle here, hit W, and now we can just move this back. I'm also going to hit X to go across X symmetry here, go into transparency mode. We're just going to bury this thing out of the way inside of our object here. Now what I'm going to do is go down here to, and also remember, you can just Alt-Tap, or we can go back to the other thing that we're working on. If you want to go through here and be like, you know what, I want this to kind of bulge out here, or you can go in here to your inflate brush and just make changes on the fly just to kind of dial in a little bit better what you were going for. That's why this is a little bit nicer. Now, if you had it already rebuilt, it wouldn't be that big a deal, but since we don't, because it would be nice low-res geometry, but you can just go in here and make slight modifications, and then once you rebuild it, you're going to be able to have that low-res geometry to go back to, and you'll be pushing around a lot fewer vertices. But this is, again, just a quick mass out. Another thing I forgot to mention, when I hold down Shift, I go to Smooth Stronger. I prefer Smooth Stronger because I like to smooth the hell out of my meshes. If I don't want to smooth that hard, I can just hold down Shift and bring that down, and then it'll smooth a little less hard. Where you get that is if you hit the comma key, brush, and if you close this here, you can open that up to all four. And then we can go to our smooth. You're going to see smooth, you have all these smooth things in here. You can just double click Smooth Stronger and you'll have it. I have it where it auto loads into ZBrush by default. So when I hit B, Smooth Stronger is always auto loaded. How you can do that is you can save the Smooth Stronger brush. You can hold down Shift and just save brush, save as, and you're going to save this in your, I don't know how to save. Oh yeah, I do. ZBrush 4R8, Z Startup. Brush presets, save it in here. It'll always load up with ZBrush. If you want it to show up in this menu in here, and you don't use it a lot, but you use it enough to want to get quick access to it occasionally, what you're going to want to do is save that brush into ZBrush 4R8 ZBrushes, and then you can put it in its own folder, save it into Smooth Brush if you've modified it at all. And then we hit the comma key, you can just go find it in this menu here. So that's the smooth brush. Now, as far as Smooth Stronger and what it's doing, let's crank that back up to 100. If you just take the smooth brush, which I guess is just your default smooth brush here, and you go down here to smooth brush modifiers, you're going to see we have weighted smooth mode. If you hover over that, you're going to see 2 is smooth, or 1 is Smooth Stronger, 0 is standard. So if I just change this to 1, this smooth brush, this regular smooth brush, oh wait, hold down Shift and change that to 1, it's just going to act like Smooth Stronger. So that's all it's doing. And all these other ones like smooth valence, subdivision, stroke direction, perpendicular, all of that stuff is just going to show up just like that. And that's where you're going to, that's where all of that is happening, just under. And then if you go into that brush menu, they just label them, and all they're really doing is changing those values probably. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. So we got our object here, we got our Z-sphere here, and we've got our Z-sphere hidden inside of our object here. You don't have to do that. It can be just be up out of the way. I prefer to just hide it in my objects here. So now with that selected, we can go Z-sphere, topology, go into edit topology. And now I'm going to turn transparency off. If I want to see these Z-spheres a little bit better, because what I'm going to basically be doing is just tapping on my object and drawing out topology. But see how it's like kind of burnt orange on a gray? What I prefer to do is go over here to Matcap Pearl, and that just highlights my edges a little bit better. And then I drop this down to a darker shade of gray here. So now I can kind of see this a little bit better. So now I can just go through here and start retopologizing. So I'm just adding topology where it needs to go, and I have X turned on when I made the Z-sphere. So now I I can just go right down the middle here. I'm just tapping, tapping, tapping. And I can tap off. And you don't have to tap off. You can hold down Control and tap, or Shift and tap, and it'll start over where you want to leave off. So like, say I want to go, you know what? I want to start topologizing here to here. If I have this activated and I touch here, it's going to connect both of those. Okay, so you're going to pick somebody. Yeah. Come over here and scroll through, and then call out a name. And maybe pick like 2 just in case somebody isn't there. So you want to scroll through. Well, I'm just going to sit here and stare while you scroll. So basically what we're doing is just retopologizing and then putting those back. And so if you hold down Shift and click where you want to start from, it'll move that activated Z sphere to the other Z sphere, and then you can just continue. Oh, okay, good. Whew. Get right down. Okay, so if Christia Angeritsen, you there? It was a Twitch person, you said? Yes. If you're there, shout out in the comments real quick. If not, you got to run her up. Yes. Or Ben Wilson on YouTube. Well, that'll just be the runner-up. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes. So Christian Angeritsen, and then if that falls through, someone else holler at me. I got to keep my Threadripper. That's how I keep my computer on. Just comment here and then email me, and I'll send out my email. I'll put out my email whenever you're here. Nobody? No? All right. Well, I'm going to give you a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to pick somebody else, and I'm just going to scroll through and just randomly pick, because my wife has to go to work. Okay, so I'm going to go, okay, so whenever it turns off, whenever it does a quick save, it'll turn off, it won't turn it off, it'll deactivate your Z-sphere. So what you got to do is go over to topology and turn on edit topology again, and that'll reactivate it. It's a feature because if it didn't do that, it would corrupt your file if you had edit topology on when you saved your ZBrush files. That was one of the things that would happen in earlier versions of ZBrush. What we could also do is if you want to start here, you can just go through here and start clicking here. And then if you want to start connecting, you see how I tapped off that reset it, and now I can just start from here. But like I said, if I want to like, oh, you know what, I want to start down here, and I touch here, it's going to connect those two. So what I'm going to have to do is I can hold down Shift and tap, or Control tap, and then it'll set it down here. Then I just go back and forth. Okay, you got it. All right. Numero uno. Can you email me your email at? Email me there. Good. Email me your email at that email I just sent out, pavlovich.mike@gmail.com, and I'll send that over to QBrush, and then we'll give you... What? Well, I don't have somebody who does this all the time who could tell me what to do. I mean, I'm married to one, but she doesn't tell me stuff. So email me, and before I hop off, I'll make sure I get that, if that's cool. So email me your email, and I'll send that over, and I'll let them handle all that stuff. So anyway, we're going to keep connecting these things back. Now, the cool thing about this is when I'm done, and let's say, you know, I have this whole thing done. If I hit A, that's going to give me my adaptive skin. If I go over here to my adaptive skin in ZBrush 4R8, if I go into solo mode here, you're going to see, let's go back to matte cap gray and white. It goes and does like this Dynamesh thing where it kind of fills the holes. Let's turn on the line and fill back on. So we're getting this result. If you don't want Dynamesh, which in this case we don't, we're going to take Dynamesh resolution, turn that down to 0, and then density, if we leave it at 2, we do A and then A again. It's giving us topology, but then it's kind of smoothed a little bit. You can, but you know, everybody, I have my email up in a lot of different places, so it hasn't been a huge deal. And I guess I could do you're on Twitch if it's easier. Hold on, Twitch, Pav mic. If it's easier, let me just do a direct message through here. Let's see, this is there it is. Okay, so viewers here. That's my viewer list. And of course I can't select it. Coming soon. All right, I've added you as a friend. Because for some reason I can't whisper you. All right, well, if you can whisper me in here, do it through Twitch, and I should get it. Or message me on Twitch. That'll work too. Okay, a lot of different ways to do this. So yeah, just go ahead and message me on Twitch or whisper me on Twitch. Anyway, so we're gonna go down here. We're gonna take density to 1, turn off preview, turn it back on, or you can hit A, toggle that back on and off, and you can do that. Yes, and also you don't necessarily, like BLXO says, if you have spaces in here, it will connect sometimes n-gons together to give you nice topology. But you can start building your surfaces like this. Now if I hit adaptive skin, make adaptive skin, you can go over here to Z-sphere, you can go to append, skin Z-sphere here, and then if I hit D, now we just have nice regular geometry here. So just really quickly, I'm just going to do a quick, we can do a little bit of Z-modeler work. So I can go over here, I can go to like bridge edges, we can go bridge this edge to this edge, this edge to this edge, and then we can just do a quick mirror and, oops, I'm still my Z-sphere. Delete your Z-sphere, you don't need that anymore. And now we've appended our new mesh here. So now we can go bridge this edge, this edge, this edge to this edge, do a quick mirror and weld, and then we can go stitch points. You can go stitch this point to stitch that point. Oops, this one to that one. There we go. And for this one, I'm just going to do a quick close holes mirror and weld because I don't really care too much. And then we'll just do a quick control, drag that out. So we've got a shape here, and then we can hit D to go into dynamic, and then you can just use Z-modeler increasing to go through and, like say, crease, edge. And now as we're creasing these edges, these are going to be pretty harsh creases, but what we can do is, again, go in here to D, and that'll keep these ones creased here, and you can also be in preview mode while you're creasing. So you can go crease here, and then crease here. So while you're creasing those things, and it's like, well, it's too sharp, you can just go in here to your geometry, dynamic, smooth subdiv up to 4, and then crease level down to 2, and then shift D and D, and then that'll go ahead and give you like a nice soft fall off that goes perfectly down here. And again, this is really low res geometry, so you can go in here with move and just move these things around. That work? Cool. All right, I got you. I'm going to go through really quickly and let's see. See if I miss anything. If I miss anything, I apologize. I'm going to go ahead and head out. Any last minute stuff? Panoramic, you drag UI and make it size like 4R7. QBrush, the material icons. That one. So when you hover over this, preview material on mesh, that's a good question. I'm not sure how to do that. I'll have to get back to you on that one. Remove brushes from the default startup brushes that start with ZBrush. That would be under brush, save as. If you go to, I think, ZBrush 4R8, where is that? Z data brush presets. So these are all the ones that start up with ZBrush. If you go into ZBrush 4R8, Z data, ZBrush presets, these are the main brushes. So that's where you can you can also save variants of these if you like, you know, I love this brush, but I just want to get rid of some stuff or modify some things. Just save over this brush, and then when you load up ZBrush, your Z data will be changed. Cool. There you go. So that's how you delete the default brushes. Cool. All right. I'm going to go ahead and check out. I got Christian's stuff here. Good. Beautiful. You guys are the best. Christian Gerritsen, Scandinavian. Yep. I probably butchered that pronunciation. Cool. Okay. So thanks for showing everybody. So we got through part 5. We've got 27 parts here. So over the next couple Twitch streams, we'll just keep going through, and we'll keep going over techniques to model this weapon. I hope that was useful for you guys, and I will catch you Tuesday mornings. I should be on 3 weeks in October for Pixelogic's channel, which I sent out earlier, and then on my channel Thursday mornings we'll be here. So thanks everybody.